All right, welcome to the Village of Pleasantville Village Board Work Session. Today is Monday, January 22 at 7 p.m. And the first item on our work session agenda is a discussion with the village's Conservation Advisory Council regarding proposed tree ordinance legislation. And attached in the agenda is the draft tree ordinance. I could share that on my screen if there's any value to that. Do you think there is?
Sure. So just to be clear, there's Alan's representing the CAC, but there's been a subgroup that pulled also from Climate Smart. Ben is our co-chair of the Climate Smart Task Force that has been working on this for a number of months. So
all right. Also on board via Zoom is Susan Pavate, our planner from BMJ Planning.
Oh,
And I see Michael Inglis.
yeah. So
Let me promote him to a panelist.
this subcommittee comprises Ben Terrapin, Andy Reinman, myself, Michael Inglis, and Nicole, and then with wonderful help from Susan Pavati. And prior to that, Eileen West has helped out some.
Mhm.
And then years ago, we did it all before and didn't quite finish. So.
And Andrew has a professional technical knowledge of trees, so.
yeah. Can you maybe describe what you do?
Sure.
For people who don't know. Yeah.
I'm a forest ecologist, a urban ecologist. Related to this, we've spent a bunch of years tracking changes in canopy cover and forest cover across Westchester County. I was with funding through the state. And broadly, that's shown across the board. Almost every municipality is losing canopy cover at a pretty rapid rate. And that has sparked a lot of municipalities to start to embrace different types of tree ordinances to mitigate that.
Okay. So do you want to just run through what's proposed or want to take the lead on this?
So
I think Helen's taking the lead.
yeah, so I just jotted down a few things. I think that most of them are pretty self-evident about why we need trees. Excuse me. First of all, here we are in Pleasantville, leafy green, nicest smelling city in the world, whatever.
That has never left us, either, right?
10th.
From
Oh,
2014.
Our logo is a tree. People love trees generally. But our concern as a Conservation Advisory Council, our name is conservation, and conservation of trees is part of that. And there has been canopy loss, and some of it is obvious and some of it is not so obvious because you see trees coming down in the public domain, not street trees or in front yards, but you don't always see what's going on in the entirety of the village or the village around us, Mount Pleasant being a big chunk of that. And trees do all sorts of wonderful things. They shade people and things, so they reduce the ambient temperature. They absorb lots of water. They reduce water runoff. They reduce pollution. Street trees in particular take the brunt of a lot of pollution coming from cars. There's lots of articles that they're good for mental health, and they feed animals, pollinators, insects. Even our favorite animal, the squirrel. So, and they do increase property values, and people use them in their properties for recreation. You climb on them, you can swing on them, and of course, we all know they're a big carbon sequesterer. So, all good things. I'm going to let Andy say this a little bit in a bit, but we are designated as a tree city and have been for 38 years. And part of being a tree city, there are 4 requirements. One is to have an active tree board or department. And I think the Conservation Council counts as that, I'm not really sure. The second one is to have a tree care ordinance, which at one point we did have. Mario Sansotto of Parks and Rec remembers we had one, but somehow it didn't make it into the E-code. We don't really know what it was. You're supposed to have a community forestry program with an annual budget of at least $2 per capita. And I don't know what our budget is, but I do know that Parks and Rec do
How much per capita did you say?
$2.
Okay.
And you're supposed to have an Arbor Day observance and proclamation. So we don't handle this. Mike Newman, Parks and Rec does. I also get the email every year and we have a short correspondence and he sends something off and somehow we scrape under the wire and whistle the tree system, which is good, but I think we could do a little bit better. And trees make good neighbors. Like people like to have trees between them and their neighbors, sides, back, wherever. So we'd like to ensure that our canopy stays at least as it is, but even maybe grows a little bit, because as Andy told me earlier, and if you want to just, you probably know these numbers off the top of your head, but these are what I included here about. Yeah, so.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we've been tracking canopy cover across Westchester. I pulled the numbers just for Pleasantville for our purposes here. We do this using satellite imagery, so we can see every sort of like square inch of the county. Between 2011 and 2021, Pleasantville has lost about 40 acres of canopy cover, and that rate has accelerated between 2016 and 2021. For context, Pleasantville currently has about 49% canopy cover, meaning just under half of all the land area is covered by a tree of some form. But that's a decline in about 10% of the canopy cover that we had in 2011. As I mentioned, like this is relatively common across Westchester. Pleasantville and more broadly Mount Pleasant are losing canopy cover faster than most other places, especially Mount Pleasant. This is important. Helen mentioned a bunch of the different reasons, but in our work, we can sort of predict what a municipality's temperature is based on its percent canopy cover with a pretty high certainty. So across 40 some odd municipalities in Westchester, how cool or hot a community is during the summer is tightly coupled with what its canopy cover is. So if we think about any sort of like climate resiliency or reducing energy costs for homeowners, maintaining canopy cover is a pretty efficient way to do that. There's been research like from unfortunate circumstances in other municipalities where they've had to cut all their trees down and have found like a 40% increase in cooling costs during the summer because of declines in canopy cover. So there's this sort of like conservation component, but there's also this important economic component. And so there's cooling. They're really important for controlling stormwater runoff and things like that. And so my, I guess, sentiment on these things is while we don't traditionally view our trees as infrastructure in communities, they perform a lot of the roles of a lot of the infrastructure that we do build. And the better that we can maintain them, increase their cover, the less we wind up spending on electricity costs for our homes, having increased culvert sizes and all the other pieces of, that we normally used to think of as infrastructure.
So when you say a loss of 40 acres over that 10 or more year time period, obviously the Toll Brothers project took down a fairly big area that had been wooded. Otherwise, it's more onesie twosie kind of losses. Am I reading it?
Yeah, Pleasantville doesn't have a ton of forest cover, so it's different than some other places. And then like some places it's driven by new development and like Toll Brothers sorts of things. Other places it's driven by a combination of storms blowing trees down, people cutting down trees in their yards. So it winds up being trees along our streets and in our yards. In Pleasantville anyway, that's probably.
I mean, that number seemed high to me, 40 acres worth of trees over 10 years.
Yeah.
There's a patch, the Toll Brothers, and also a patch on the other side, isn't there, of the sawmill where some.
Yeah,
well, Con Ed did quite a job along the aqueduct.
I mean, I've only lived in Pleasantville for 6 or 7 years now, and I know just on my street, a bunch of trees have been taken down. And part of it's been from Con Ed following storms.
I think almost certainly a lot of trees were lost because of Con Ed's standards now for the aqueduct high tension wires. Appeared to be.
I mean, I can make a map and we
appear to be only loosely related to real risk, but whatever.
Yeah, actually, if you can send that to us, that'd be.
Yeah,
I'd be interested to see.
No, we do. We're happy to put a proper presentation together, but we wanted to really just get the ball rolling and talk about the nuts and bolts. And I have a bunch of key points from the ordinance, but I figure maybe I could just use that as a summary at the end if you want to just run through what you read or questions you have. Or I can mention the key points.
Why don't you mention the key points and then we can kick them around?
Okay. So one of the things we want to do is really more of a carrot than a stick. And if people want to take a tree down, we're going to encourage them to plant another tree or several other trees. And we decided to do it on the basis of the size of the tree being taken out. And a standard measurement of a mature tree is to use something called diameter at breast height, which is literally 4'6" or something off the ground. What's the diameter of the tree? And for every 6 inches of diameter, we decided you should plant a new small tree, like a sapling sized tree. They have a much better chance of taking root and growing faster than a larger tree. So that's one thing, is to encourage people to replant. If they don't have room to replant or they choose not to replant, then we're going to ask people to donate to a tree fund, which will then generate monies to have other people plant on their property or village property if necessary, but hopefully other residents will say, well, I'd like a tree. And different from the 50-50 tree program we have now, which focuses on the front yards of houses, and the idea is beautification and the look of the village. This tree planting program would be anywhere on a property, and
just to add trees.
Just to add trees. And one of the things we'd like to do is to encourage people to plant natives. If you're planting on your own property, your own choice, we're not going to force you to plant a native. We're just not going to allow you to plant an invasive tree. And I think that's pretty standard these days. But if you're getting a tree from the tree fund, then it would be a native tree. And to make it a bit simpler, we're going to bring the 50-50 tree program tree list and this list to be the same. So there's not some A or B choice going on. So, and it wouldn't be complicated. We only have 2 non-natives on the 50-50 tree list now. And that tree list is really for people to plant any size tree, and they pay for half of it. This other program, the tree cost to a homeowner would be very small, because we're talking about very small trees. And we talked to the rec department and talked about they would buy them in bulk. And I think we'll have to do some pre-ordering, because a lot of nurseries need to give an advance notice to provide a number of trees, and it wouldn't be a massive amount. And we'd probably do it to start with about once a year, fall or spring, to offer up trees to be planted by residents.
And then the residents would come get the tree and they would plant it.
Yes, and we looked at a lot of ordinances, for all sorts of reasons, and other bigger municipalities and others, such as Greenberg, same thing. They don't have the village plant those trees, the homeowners do. So that's one reason to keep them small, so they can be.
So when individuals plant trees.
Yeah.
How does, obviously, when an arborist looks at a site for a tree, they're looking at how far will the root system extend when it's mature, and what is it going to interfere with, and all kinds of things like that. Is there a significant difference in the success rate of individually planted trees versus municipally or professionally planted trees?
Joe, no, I would say, generally, the expectation that planting a younger tree, you'll have a better chance of it getting established, and it will cost less, and so on. And physically, it's easier to deal with. And I have helped plant larger trees. They're very heavy. A 2.5-inch apple tree, 2.5-inch caliper.
Yeah.
So the same as DBH, weighed about 250 pounds, and it was a struggle.
I'm just saying, when our kids have planted trees, and they're saplings, and they plant them too close to the house, or too close to the fence, or too close to another tree, and they just don't make it.
So you're asking if a homeowner's just given free rein to plant wherever they want? Well, I think the most sensible thing to do would be when we approve their tree removal permit is to give them some helpful instructions.
Yeah,
Maybe you're planting this tree, here's the type of situation that you.
yeah, here's how to plant it, here's where
Yeah,
it should go,
yeah.
you know, et cetera.
I mean,
Mario
the-
gives quite a bit of instruction, sorry, for the 50-50 tree planting
Yeah.
program, and he keeps an eye on all the trees that he plants as well, and
Mhm.
so I think that he would probably be involved in the instruction process.
Yeah, the homeowners program, if they cut down a tree, they get approval and they
Right.
replant, there's actually a check-in period, year
Mhm.
1 and year 3.
Okay,
So you have to prove that there's, you know, the tree is alive and it's surviving, just because we try to think about ways that how people would game the system.
right,
And so we have these methods to ensure that the tree is successful and that people
Right.
aren't just cutting down trees and making sure that the next
Right.
one fails.
right. And you
Yeah.
have to go back and say marijuana does not count as the police.
Yeah. And the 50-50 program is very, very different because in essence, the homeowner is paying for half of it, so they'll go for very large trees sometimes.
Right,
And then the village is planting the tree. Our program is not that. They're all gonna be small saplings,
Mhm.
homeowners are planting it. So it's a very different, you know, experience. We're just trying to increase the overall canopy.
yeah,
So-
for sure.
I had a question about a hypothetical that I didn't quite understand how it would work about tree removal. So if someone buys a property, we're moving to a property here, and let's say they have a bunch of Norway maples that have taken over the property.
Mm.
The previous owner didn't take, whatever, let everything go, and some of them are bigger than the DBH that
Yeah.
you've listed here. You know, someone might have 20 of these potentially. What would you advise that person? I mean,
So you're asking about a tree that you're saying,
Oh, so-
considering it's not
He's
the
asking for a
perfect tree.
friend, right?
I'm asking about a specific tree that's highly invasive and pretty annoying, and a lot of people take them down, want to take them down, and I guess I think that maybe it should be taken
Can I feel
down.
that one?
But
So
guess that-
we did not have consensus entirely on our committee on this,
because
so.
they kill everything else around.
So I will just say, you know, just to back up a few steps,
Yeah.
like putting this draft together took months and months, like it's surprisingly complicated.
Years.
Yeah.
There's so many different moving parts and so many variables, but on that specific issue, I gave in to the majority, which didn't want to put an exception for Norway maples.
Oh, you talked specifically about.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
I would have given a carve out, but I think there's this dispute on this issue, and Helen can speak to this, you know. It depends on which aspects of a tree, you know, you value the most. Like if you're talking about carbon capture, if you're talking about, you know, mitigating weather fluctuations and things like that, Norway maples can do that as well, right?
Right.
If you're worried about biodiversity,
Right.
Norway maple's not so good.
Right.
So I don't know, does somebody want to speak to the not giving a carve out to Norway maples?
So it was a bit more complicated than that, because Norway maple's an obvious one to pick. But there are others,
I'm not an expert. I just know that tree.
right?
Main one though, here though,
It's a bully.
right?
I mean, the problem is when you get to, like, let's say there's 20 trees, that's really gets classified as clear cutting. So then we have a separate section on clear cutting.
Mhm.
So it gets very complicated. We wanted to simplify it where it was, you know, the homeowners might not know what type of tree they have.
Yeah.
So we wanted to simplify it. So we didn't really differentiate the Norway maple versus
Yeah.
another type of tree.
But the village arborist could come out and grant an exception in that particular
Actually,
case?
The
or-
ordinance, no, the ordinance doesn't say you can't take trees down, it just says you have to ask permission to take a tree down.
Right.
And that we ask that you not take more than 5 down in a 12-month period. And that cutoff for taking one down is more or less it's anything bigger than 6 inches DBH.
Right.
Obviously, a cherry tree at 6 inches is a different
I thought it said
age from
4.
a Norway maple. But there is an exception to that, which is we're adding a tree buffer around the property, which is different from the setback. It's much smaller than the setback. And it's modeled after Newcastle's ordinance where a small buffer around a property is off limits for taking anything down bigger than 4 inches. Whatever's going on, that way you can protect you and your neighbour have a screen between you.
Right.
And there've been quite a few incidences in Pleasantville where neighbours have taken trees down right on the property line and caused changes, not necessarily great changes on the neighbour's other side. You might think, oh, taking tree down makes no difference, but it changes their shade pattern, it changes a number of things. So that's where the 4 inches is. But
And that, of course, having seen that many times, is a complicated story where in some cases the aggrieved neighbor is the one that didn't have any trees and had a big green backyard and was aggrieved that the neighbor was essentially creating a similar environment.
oh yeah, because they wanted the same. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's tricky. And it's not to say we as a village couldn't consider a Norway maple or a similar very large, early leafing, difficult tree differently. It's just a hard thing to sort out. I mean, there are other trees like Tree of Heaven we shouldn't really encourage and so on. So it's, we can certainly.
I don't know, it was discussed, about the other feature of my hypothetical of an ownership transfer. I mean, I guess I can imagine a situation where someone's lived a long time and they're kind of going one tree at a time, but sometimes people take a property over that hasn't been touched in 20 years by the previous, usually elderly owner. Could there be a discussion about that situation?
You mean an exception made to the 5 trees?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, so.
Well, the idea is that it's not necessarily just 5 trees. It could be a certain percentage of your property. So many people don't have properties big enough for 5 trees in Pleasantville.
Yeah, I get.
But there are some.
Right.
Yeah, there are some where the canopy would be significantly altered if you took down 5 trees. But you're talking about property where maybe you've, other than the house itself, you think there's some large amount of trees and there's no light hitting the ground, and maybe they want some other use of their yard.
Right.
It's a permitting application, and I imagine, like anything, there can be exceptions.
Yeah. So one scenario, and I wonder if we could have Susan talk to this. So one scenario we were trying to address was new development and to try to limit clear cutting on new development, at least extreme kind of clear cutting. So Susan, because this is really kind of your area more, is that you okay with that?
Sure.
I was wondering if you could try and describe how we address that in the ordinance.
So the thinking is that there is a definition for clear cutting, and Helen has spoken to that, really trying to limit how many trees are taken down, whether it's a number or a percentage of the trees on your lot. There's sort of different thresholds, and once you meet one, that's considered clear cutting, and you have a limit on how much that can occur. When you have a situation where you have a major development like a Toll Brothers, that's kind of a different scenario. They may need to do clear cutting under that definition to make their development happen. I think the way that the ordinance is written now, it would still be considered clear cutting. There would be a tree permit associated with the site plan, whatever approval there is, but the approval agency or authority, whether it's the planning board, board of trustees, they would consider what mitigation is appropriate to compensate for that clear cutting. So it's not that they would deny the application because of that, but they would say, okay, you have to remove 20% of or 30 or 40% of the trees on this particular site in order to make this development happen. What are you going to do to mitigate the impact of that? Where are you going to plant trees elsewhere? Are there wetlands on the site that can be restored so that they have better function? So it allows the agency to look at the tree removal in a holistic way as part of that site plan application.
And is one option in such a scenario to buy out of the responsibility by contributing to the tree fund?
I don't think we explicitly said that, at least as it relates to site plan review. I mean, I think it's certainly something that the agency, the approving authority, could consider. I think to go back to earlier points, ideally we don't want to see a lot of trees come down. So I think the beauty of having it as part of a planning board or trustees application is that you could talk through these things. Are there ways that you could limit the tree removal? Can you get by with less? And so, yes, we could have them contribute to a fund. I think ideally they would replace them on site. If there's not the ability to do that, then you could look at offsite options or contribution to the tree fund. But I think we don't want to create a situation where people are sort of buying their way out of it and you're not really necessarily getting the mitigation on the property.
I see in Zoom,
Michael, yeah.
Michael Inglis.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. I would like to add that one way that they could perhaps mitigate the loss of the trees is to cluster the development on the site so that they would actually have the density that they required, but to use less of the area. So then the trees could be maintained. But
Well,
that's something for the planning agency to talk through with the developer, maybe one way of sorting it out.
So the recent logical example to refer to is the Toll Brothers project, right? Where you have a zoning code that permits a certain number of units as of right. And then the question is, how do you array them to minimize the impact on the landscape, right?
Right. I think in that situation, I don't know that they could have clustered more than they did. I mean, it's a fairly tight
They are pretty
site,
clustered, right? Yes.
but perhaps they could have planted more trees. In some of the cleared areas like along the front, for example. I know those things came up, and I think at the time there wasn't really anything in the code that spoke to trees. I mean, at that time, most tree ordinances were just about letting you take down trees, in a sense.
Mhm.
They weren't really
Yeah.
about protecting the trees. And so I think if there had been something in the code at that time, then the village might have had some ammunition that if it's something that trustees wanted as part of that approval to say, okay, you took down 50 trees, you have room to plant 25 more. Here's what you're going to do, and then maybe you could contribute to the fund for the other trees that you can't replace on site.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, because just to state the obvious, like, even planting a bunch of saplings isn't really gonna replace the mature tree except over time, right?
Right.
And so when we're talking about, all of the benefits that we've been discussing, from carbon capture to, temperature mitigation and all of that, these are not, we're trying to mitigate this as much as possible with the tree replanting, but it's not a one-to-one exactly.
Right.
That was the justification for one tree for every 6 inches in
That's
diameter.
right.
We sort of like figured over like a 10-20 year time span, we would like the new trees that are planted to collectively be able to sort of recoup the services provided by the tree that was
Mhm.
cut down. So
if you have some mighty tree that, has got a trunk like this, what is that? 40 inches or something?
Yeah.
Potentially somebody, this code might say you have to plant 6 or 7 saplings, all of which have the potential to be in decades hence a mighty tree.
Well,
depends on what you plant. I think
Yeah.
like one of the things that we talked a lot about is what do you plant in its place? And I think at the end of the day, what's most important is planting the right thing wherever it's going to get planted, right? And so if you have a power line, you have something right next to a house, you don't want to put a giant oak there because in 50 years, you'll be back in the situation of potentially having to cut down a tree. And so like maybe something like a dogwood or something like that, or a redwood that doesn't get as large, but can still provide services would be a logical one to place. So it's not necessarily that you're planting 6 trees and then in 80 years, now we have like 6 times the canopy cover that one tree had. It probably isn't going to work out that way. And there's going to be some attrition along the way.
So, and of course, the other problem we've had is, especially with street trees, a sort of a monoculture, not only in species, but in terms of age.
Yep.
Right.
And I mean, there was that very famous project back in the 80s at Harvard Yard where landscape architect led project cut down a whole bunch of healthy trees because they were going to lose this, world famous green roof over Harvard Yard all at once. So we have somewhat the same thing with a lot of our street trees, but when you get behind people's properties, I mean, we certainly have encountered many times, sort of further to what Michael said, people who buy a property that's, you know, very, very wooded, very, very shaded, even a small parcel, you know, a 50 by 100 parcel with a whole lot of trees, and it gets very little direct sun, and it's damp in the summer, and, you know, people want to open it up. They would then have the option of replacing trees that ultimately would be smaller, obviously, during their tenure there, or contributing to a fund.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
I think like the idea, like the big picture is to figure out a way to curb declines in canopy cover while still providing homeowners to be able to kind of do what they want on their
Right.
property. And it's kind of like a Rubik's Cube game. If you're going to remove something here, let's find someplace else where we can replace it. So
Right.
at least as a community,
Yes,
we're not losing the services.
makes sense.
So following up, just so I understand the finances of it, so let's say someone has a 100-year-old tree that arborist recommends needs to come down. That's good. That's a multi-$1,000 cost of the homeowner just to do safety removal of a tree.
Mhm.
Then what is the next financial outlay for that homeowner, that property owner? Like, cause you're saying that something has to be replaced.
Yeah, so
What happens next?
one thing that we haven't said yet that I think should be clear is that, if there's an immediate hazard, that's like, we don't require anything. If somebody has a diseased tree, we don't require them to, pay into the, fund. But we do require them to submit a permit to get, approval. If they're taking down a large, healthy tree, then
No, I wasn't implying healthy, but
Oh, you weren't implying healthy. Well, that's the distinction that we
Right.
make in the code right now,
Yeah.
right? So if it's a diseased tree, then
But
you
they can-
apply for the permit, you get the permit, you cut the tree down, and that's all you're required to do. If it's a healthy tree, you apply for a permit, you cut it down, then you either pay for your own trees that you're replanting on your property.
Yeah.
Or you pay into the tree replanting fund.
So how do you manage the fact that there really isn't a bright line between a tree that is perceived as healthy or not, or a tree that's perceived as a danger to somebody else? I mean, we've many, many times had a circumstance
there
where,
could be an imbalance.
you know, in the end,
Yeah.
somebody sends a certified letter to their neighbor and says, you know, I'm putting you on record that I believe this big tree or big branch that is gonna land on my property if it comes down is a risk. And
We
then,
have an
right.
an arborist has to approve it, so somebody who is certified as an arborist.
I believe, I have
you
great
know,
respect for
you guys
arborists,
just-
other than say you can get somebody to say anything.
Can I just say you guys are getting a little taste? of what's going on for months and
Just to put an example on it, I mean, a healthy tree that, or it's either a tree that is not diseased and is very large and is imbalanced is perceived as threatening.
Yeah, so,
by many
yeah,
arborists.
that would be,
Right.
you know, that could be a
Because a storm
justifiable.
has taken down one part of it years ago and it's now growing in a asymmetrical way. You know what I'm saying?
Right,
like we
so
have a
maybe it could be
definition like a
part of,
hazard
okay,
tree.
Yeah.
yeah, I'm
So
sorry.
that's-
But we do also recommend that people don't cut trees down over a certain size because that tree has taken, as you pointed out,
Yeah.
hundreds of years to
Right,
get there.
right.
We don't really have time to sit around and wait for trees to
Yeah.
grow to that size again. So I think we should be mindful of when we look at a tree, okay, it might look imbalanced, but trees are pretty resilient
Yeah.
things and generally they'll try and be balancing themselves. And if they're not, then you can trim a tree. You don't have to take the whole tree down. You can help it rebalance. And the arborist question is very good. We talked to some arborists and I think it was Ottening. I think the Ottening, they have an arborist on hire
Yeah.
for the village and for the town. And the arborist said, you know, he had a couple of submissions for tree removals, which was it, maybe it was Peekskill, which he felt were not perfect, we'll say. Suspect. And he called the arborist who submitted it and said, I've looked at that tree, A, it's not whatever you said it was, and B, it looks healthy. And you can't keep submitting this to the village and expect us to accept it. So I think you need a little checks and balances now and again.
Mhm.
Most of the time, that's not going to be the case. Most of the time, people don't want to spend a lot of money to take a tree down, which includes
That's a lot of money.
the
Even
cost
just
of the
safety
arborist,
pruning
right?
is a lot of money.
Pardon?
Even just safety pruning is a lot of
Yes,
money.
it all-
Can be a lot
yeah,
of money
all
if you have a lot of
costs
trees.
A lot of money, and
Yeah.
so our tree fund, some of that money won't get spent on trees, it'll get spent on paying an arborist, that Parks and Rec have an arborist on some kind of retainer
Yeah.
who's not associated with a tree cutting company, and have them do the walk around once a year of trees that have been planted, or follow up with a tree that possibly somebody has said needs to come down and somebody else says, no, it doesn't.
Mhm.
And those somebodies can be, so one thing we haven't talked about is who is saying, who's getting the permit, who is,
Right.
and that is generally going to be the building inspector, who isn't necessarily a tree expert. And the building inspector should have every right to say, I don't know if this tree should come down or not, and then there would be some call to have an arborist.
Yeah,
So, but the building inspector is not mostly not going to be saying this tree should or shouldn't come down. It's really a numbers game. You only asked for 2 trees to come down. You have every right to take it down, and you'll have to plant some more.
Could the arborist be made available on a kind of retainer to the property owner?
yeah, so we looked into this with, so Mario, who, for those of you who don't know, is the foreman for our Parks and Rec department. He was involved with the tree ordinance for peak scales, and, you know, he knows a lot about trees, and he very much encouraged us to have a contract of some sort with an arborist. I mean, we're too small to have, you know, a full-time arborist,
Sure.
obviously, but and at one point he looked into that, right? He talked to a couple of people and got. a
Right, but
couple
I
of
think
quotes.
Michael's asking about making an
Whether-
arborist available to residents.
Yeah.
That's not our intent.
Turn into a very big expense potentially, right?
Yeah, that's just, the arborist would be for village
Yeah,
use.
the problem is it becomes too expensive. Yeah, if we were larger.
I mean, what we looked at is having an arborist come every 2 weeks and to do like a day and review all the applications where there was a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I somewhat doubt it would need to be that often, right? I mean,
No, I mean, it wouldn't necessarily be on a regular, it would be as
Ad hoc, it all
you know,
depends
on
on the
demand, as it
application.
were.
So we're not
Like,
having arborist, with a text pager that they hold, just.
Well, one of the guys Mario knows, I think, is mostly retired, right? But so these kinds of gigs are appealing to him, where it's
Plus-
a little less demanding.
The reason you want access to an arborist is if the village has a turnaround on a permit, you have to be able to say yes or no.
So I do have a question.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure, I skimmed the legislation, so maybe this is in there, and I apologize if it is. It seems to me that one of the big danger areas in terms of losing tree cover has to do with the difference between was approved and what sometimes actually happens when the larger projects are done. Remembering that the people who take down the trees are not actually the contractors, they're usually a subcontractor that specifically has a machine that grabs a tree and cuts it and does all that. This has come up recently with somebody was upset about one of the buildings on Washington Avenue, but also it's something that we experienced personally during the Toll Brothers, where there were many more trees cut down than appeared to be set up in the plans. That's just my personal opinion.
which I think, just to be clear, it's public session. I don't think Robert Hughes believes that's the case. Am I right?
No, it's not, no, he doesn't contest that could be the case. What we agreed to was that it was never, the tree cover was never documented before
Right.
the original cutting, that there was supposed to be there was a set aside for natural cover. And then that whole area, now there's one tree standing. And this is forest before, but there were no photos of it. And I was a naive homeowner before that,
But did they cut down the trees 7 years ago or?
No, this was in 2000 and I want to say 13 or 14 before they started construction. That was
No,
one
no,
of the
but my
first
point,
ones.
but did they cut down the trees,
Yes,
do you think?
they brought, we were there the day that they did it. They brought a
Okay.
machine that,
There are freely available images. You can go back before 2013 and see exactly what was there. Like,
yeah, if you can,
Talking to the right guy.
yeah.
Susan
I'd love to see that.
Favate had her hand up.
Sorry,
Are you
sorry.
still
Sorry, I'm
wondering?
not done. I
Okay.
apologize. So my question is, would something that we would want to consider be when we are doing larger projects that are approved to have a large number of trees removed? Could we then have an arborist or somebody else who's an expert on call there making sure when trees come down that the right trees come down and no others?
Well, I think that's absolutely a great idea. I don't think if that arborist necessarily has to be this same on retainer arborist. I think that can be
Yeah,
part of the large
whatever,
project
yeah.
is you make it a requirement, and
Yeah.
if that's something we should add into the
I mean,
ordinance.
that's really a
that
site
there's
plan
a
issue
tree
and
plan.
how, further to what Susan had previously said about the site plan approval process and then
Yeah.
the site plan review.
So there should be a
Because
before and
I'm
after.
just saying, like, once somebody takes down a tree, there
You
is
can't.
no putting it back. It's
That's
gone,
right.
right? And it's not, when you're talking about neighbors and whatever, these kinds of things that we create that are a carrot and stick incentive plan are probably fine. But the capacity for, one person or a subcontractor or whatever to remove a whole swath of trees when they're doing
Mhm.
a big project is significant, and that can't be undone if they do it wrong.
Absolutely, and I agree with you. I think a site plan with current trees marked, and then a tagging of the trees, and then an eyeballing of the tagging of the trees. And then, yes, somebody on site when it's happening.
The same way
It's
that
a big project. I don't see why that.
when
would
you have a
be
knee surgery, they
impossible.
write on the other knee, do not operate.
I hear you, David. Yeah.
Yeah, Susan, you had your hand up. Do you still want to say something or did it get it covered or?
Yeah, well, now I'm going to answer or respond a little bit to the larger projects. I think these are great
Okay.
points. And I think it's one area of the ordinance that perhaps could be beefed up a little bit because right now we sort of speak fairly broadly to the idea that there needs to be mitigation. And I think we give some examples, but general examples of what that mitigation might be. But it may be that we need a little bit more detail that, specific to trees. We need to have an arborist look at this and we may need to have that looked at as part of site plan as well. I don't want to open up too big of a can of worms, but I think it's a really good point because that is where you do see the biggest danger of significant tree loss. I think on the other side, what I wanted to mention, where you have it's homeowners basically. I think we worked really hard to not make this onerous and to make it workable. The committee did a ton of work looking at ordinances all around Westchester in particular. You don't necessarily want to be the leader on some of this stuff and be the first one experimenting. And a lot of your neighboring communities have done a lot of this work. So that was sort of early on in the committee's, their research and their efforts. And then in the fall, the county came out with their model ordinance, which was very helpful. And just gives a little bit more assurance that the county's vetted this a little bit. There's a lot of work done on their side. And so we took a lot of the definitions from that ordinance. We took some of the process as well. I think what's needed here is that the village staff needs to take a careful look. We want to make sure that it's workable and that the village has the capacity to manage this. I think you heard tonight, there's just a lot of details, logistics of working these programs. And some of that may be ironed out as they are rolled out. But certainly the building inspector and others who would be involved in this process need to take a look and make sure that, from an enforcement capacity standpoint, that this is all workable.
Thanks, Susan. I agree with both of those points.
Right.
One last thing that I'll mention in like what data we were able to dive into when we were looking at canopy cover change across Westchester is we looked at changes in canopy cover as a function of like having an ordinance, not having an ordinance, and then some details of the ordinance. Now, no two ordinances are the same, and so our replication there is limited. But what we sort of generally found was that simply having an ordinance alone didn't really do much. You needed to have an ordinance that required a permit to remove a tree and that also incentivized planting new trees. Those municipalities performed better from a canopy cover perspective than those in any of the other categories. And so that helped to inform what we were doing here.
Okay.
What is the in an untended forest, is the life and death cycle through age, disease, and storm of tree cover in an untended forest generally produce the status quo?
So on average in a forest, you would have like probably of canopy trees, like 1% mortality. Sometimes a little bit less than that
In a year?
in a year.
Yes.
1% or less. And that's like mortality, but there's trees beneath it that are about to take its place. Generally, probably quite a bit less than 1%. The longevity of the trees in the canopy for our native trees will be somewhere between 200 and 400 years. So barring wind throw disturbance or something like that, they would be around for several hundred years.
So the general tree canopy in an untended forest with old growth trees remains relatively stable.
Yep.
A big tree is lost, and there are lots of little trees that can now
That's
grow
right.
that wouldn't have grown if the big tree had remained.
Yeah, it's sort of like a conveyor belt of trees, sort of where you have your big
Yeah.
old ones and there's ones inching their way out, just kind of waiting for their day. In the
Well, it means a
sun.
lot of saplings under no maples.
That's right.
Well, the understory can be shared too, right? It's
Yeah.
all connected.
Yeah, and it's like,
Yeah.
in the absence of deer and all these other things that we've done,
Yeah.
you have these multi-layered forests, and so it's rare that you have a gap get created in the forest and then being able to see down to the ground.
Mhm.
There's always layers there in
Right.
place.
Could we go back to the arborist, question, or you talked about arborists connected with, tree cutting companies or whatever, I can't remember the term you used. And you would propose an arborist for the village that was not connected, right, to a company. So I'm just trying to think about when a homeowner when there's a new government demand on them, or like a new requirement, if it could be paired with something that's also positive, because some people will interpret this as not as onerous, but as a kind of another government restriction they have to deal with, right? But if it could be paired with something a service they're getting, like an arborist, I don't know. I'm thinking out loud here, but it feels to me like that is more explainable to people. It's like there are new things you can't do, and the village has an arborist that will also when you're concerned about a tree or when you think you want to take a tree down, the village arborist will come to your property. That's part of your tax money.
Could you have like a 50-50 share program with an arborist as well? And the money that is collected for this tree planting fund can help support that as well. Like if I have a tree and I don't really know, is this healthy, is it not? I can sort of split with the village 50-50 to pay an arborist to come out and take a look at it. And maybe it helps because the village is covering half the cost to minimize any bias that might be in place by whatever arborist.
I mean, I like the brainstorm. That's the direction I'm thinking, because the way it is now, if you have 50 trees, you already work with if you're a responsible person, you already have an arborist that right? Who's come to your house to do safety pruning, or who's come to house to do canopy balance. But that person does work for a company. I mean, there's no doubt. And you never quite know when they propose something to you that costs $3,000. You're like, do I really need to spend that this year? Or could I wait another year?
We certainly couldn't be in the position of saying, "Oh, call the village arborist," and the two of them might.
Well, no,
You have to be careful. I don't mean to diminish your point.
How often
Right.
this would be, or how expensive it would be.
Yeah.
In the budget to just say we have it.
Yeah, no,
we
I
have
was
an
gonna,
arborist on retainer that.
yeah, the
No.
focus wasn't arborist. The focus was because we have the 50-50 tree program, and that's 50-50. The thought process, and it hasn't been totally like finalized. But the concept is the saplings would be free or heavily discounted.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to encourage the planting of them anywhere. So to me, that's more the carrot. We have these free saplings that we're offering. Because the arborists, we're gonna have to pay for to get them to come in.
They're quite expensive.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
challenge.
so that's the part I don't know, because I've only ever met them that are connected to a company.
And there's arborists that like act as arborists, but don't do the work of cutting down
Yeah.
a tree. I think like that's the ideal, because like you said,
Like a
you don't know, are they telling me a tree is
consultant
sick because they
kind of
want a few $1,000s to cut it down, or does it, really need to come down?
I mean,
Susan had her hand up again. Susan, did you?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting concept to provide a service, but I think we really need to think through it and be careful because of the potential for conflict. If the village's arborist is making issuing opinions on the tree that a person wants to take down, but then they're also sort of available to residents, there's just a potential for conflict there, and obviously they work for the village at the base. So it can get very complicated. I think we'd want to really look into it.
The other piece of that, and I think every community has seen it at one point or another, where there's the implication of liability. If a community says, no, the tree is okay, you can't take it down, and something bad happens, it produces an issue.
Sure, but we don't have you can't take it down.
No, I know, I'm just,
We only say you
Yeah.
can't take it down if you've already taken down 5 trees in this 12 months period.
Well, I think Peter means if we have an arborist, a village arborist saying that may
We
increase the
talked
liability.
about that and we decided
Yeah.
for that reason, it
Yeah.
was best to not have like
Yeah.
a village arborist make that decision.
Yeah,
But also, I don't think you were saying an arborist on some other payroll, such as this, would be coming and say you can't take it down. They'd be giving their own opinion about whether it was
Yeah.
healthy or not healthy.
well,
And then
again,
you're in a situation like in any of these professions, you have to decide who you trust.
Right.
but I do think that there are other things we can offer as well. I mean, we can certainly offer a lot of education and information, about trees. I feel like Mario already does some of that through the 50/50 program. And we could definitely do more in that direction. And, another idea that's not in the ordinance, but that we kind of kicked around at one point is the idea of having what, I can't remember which other ordinance referred to as heritage trees, namely trees that are sort of special trees because they're particularly old or they have a particular value or something like that. So that we do something that wouldn't be regulated necessarily, but something to recognize, kind of as a village to recognize the value of certain trees in particular. Anyway, I think the idea of offering as much support as we can is,
Yeah,
is a good one.
that's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah,
I'm thinking also about the new, when you have buy a new home, New York State, you can opt into a home energy consultation, right? For free, where they come and examine
mhm,
the cracks in your foundation and help you lower your energy costs. And I could
Yeah.
envision something like that for arborists too, that you just moved from Brooklyn, you never owned a tree before. You've never had a tree. Now you're here, you have 20.
come on, a
trees.
tree grows in Brooklyn.
You have 20 trees. You can't just be expected to know what to do or like how to identify it, and it might be nice to have, yeah.
All right, so this has been a great discussion, and obviously you guys have done a huge amount of really
Yeah,
good
a lot.
work, and I thank you for all of that. So we need to move on to our next thing. So it sounds like the next steps are for the village staff to really vet this and think about operations and all of that, further to what Susan said. And then convene another gathering with you guys. Does that sound right?
Yeah, we didn't talk about some of the costs. I think that's very important.
Right.
And that the cost of replanting
Right, you got it.
doesn't exceed the amount of the
That's right.
trees.
Yes.
So it's something to work out. And we
Yeah.
didn't talk about fines for if you
Yeah.
take a tree down and you haven't been given permission. So,
All right, I thank you all.
thank you.
Tom,
Thank you.
just a quick one, sure, Tom.
Yeah, I just, on a positive note, I agree with everything, what trees do for us,
Yes,
but this is gonna be one more burden on the taxpayer of Pleasantville, on their property. Michael kind of stepped on, mentioned it
Mhm.
in the beginning. If I have this straight, when this goes through, whatever this program is, after living in this town for 70 years. Now, if I want to cut down a tree on my property for any reason, it's living, it's dead, I don't like it, it's the wrong tree. Now I have to pay for a permit, get approval to cut the tree down, to do that on my own property. And this is absurd. It's absolutely absurd. The tree coverage is wonderful. We need it for what trees do, but then you have a project like the Toll Brothers and to use your words, they clear cut the whole land. And now there's other big projects that are projected that might be being built in Pleasantville in the near future. For those projects, maybe you do need to get on the ball then and say, you have 100 trees on this property, you can't cut them all down. You build your building around whatever you have to do. And if you have to cut that tree down, you're gonna put 2 more up over there. That's perfectly understandable going in that direction. But for the homeowner to put another burden on us, you know, already in a village where our taxes are off the wall, it's just totally absurd. You're gonna tell me I can't put a Norwegian maple on my property if I want a Norwegian maple on my property, which by the way, I have on my property. It's just absurd. Now, if you're going to do this, and what if I cut down my tree? You're gonna come and you're going to give me a fine because I didn't pay for a permit to do something I don't want to do? So I just want to bring that to a point. It's no disrespect meant for this committee or what you're trying to do or the value of a tree. I know the value of a tree. I'm a woodworker. Wood grows on trees. It is wonderful. But in order for us, again, to have another burden, another permit, a building permit, that's kind of absurd. And I heard something about having the town's building inspector may be in charge of this. That's well beyond what his duty should be. A tree is not a building. He may know 100% about it, but it's not his job. And you're talking about having an arborist. If I heard it correctly, I might have to pay an arborist to come to my home to look at a tree that I think I might want to cut down for whatever reason possible. Well, that's never going to happen. That tree will come down in a storm at midnight at night, and nobody will know from nothing. But that being said, I don't agree with what's going forward, and that's why I'm here tonight. Because if you can tell something to make me change my mind, try.
Okay.
But
What
that.
if we write an exemption in where once you're older than the oldest tree on your property, it no longer counts?
Well,
No,
all right.
we'll be talking
So,
about again, this
yeah.
was the preliminary meeting,
Yeah, so there's
if-
more discussion to be had. I thank you for that, Tom.
Yeah.
We do need to move on
Okay.
here. Got a big night here. Thank you, guys.
Thanks. Thank you.
Do you want us to drag these away?
If you're willing, sure, that would be great. See that? We come here and we put you to work.
So I'll put this in. Wall on.
There were a couple of them back.
There's the back thing. These things. That's the way it's.
We need one of them. Don't need 2 of them. You prefer to get rid of them? What do you think?
Do you want the chairs again?
Thank you, thanks.
Yeah, I don't do that.
Bye.
No,
I'm just making sure it's that thing wrong.
I never. I hear you. Yeah.
Hey, Eric. All right, are we ready all? Good evening and welcome to Village Board Meeting for the Village of Pleasantville. Today is Monday, January 22. As is always the case, you can pick up Zoom links to watch or participate in our meetings at pleasantville-ny.gov. And within a few days, you can pick up an on-demand webcast of this meeting or meetings that preceded it at pleasantville-ny.gov. So a few announcements to make, but I will hold them for the moment because the first and biggest event of our evening is promotion of one of our officers. I invite Chief Gretzner to introduce.
Good evening, Mayor Shearer, village trustees, village administrator Morrissey, members, family, and friends of the Pleasantville Police Department and the Pleasantville community. Later tonight, I will be presenting the department's goals for 2024. We all understand how important it is for a police department to set and work toward common goals. Goal setting lets the public see our priorities and where we believe our resources will be best utilized. But organizations inevitably fail to meet goals when the goals are not embraced by the people tasked with accomplishing them. The retirement of Sergeant Thomas Woods provided us with the opportunity to come before the village board tonight and recommend David Casal be promoted to sergeant. Dave's time here in Pleasantville has been marked by working toward and accomplishing our common goals of connection to the community and service to the public. He possesses a unique ability to connect with people and has served the residents of Pleasantville with empathy, compassion, and humor. Over the last 9 years, Dave has left an indelible mark on this department and this community. Officer Casal transferred to Pleasantville in 2015. After 2 short years, I asked Dave to become the department's first special needs liaison officer. We had recognized a need for families of children with special needs to have a direct contact inside the department. Dave's outgoing personality and unique perspective combined to make him the perfect person to fill the role. Dave was tasked with establishing and maintaining personal connections in our special needs community, as well as providing the other members of our department with updates and information regarding those families to improve our ability to respond to their needs. While it is not uncommon for larger departments to have staff assigned full-time to outreach within the intellectually and developmentally disabled community, Dave did not have a model to follow for a smaller department like ours. He has been tireless in his efforts to provide our special needs community with the service they deserve. To say that Dave has embraced his role and the work it entails is a gross understatement. Dave follows up with families after calls for service, spends time maintaining friendships at the Nicholas Center, and constantly makes connections throughout the community. It is not an exaggeration to say that the program owes its great success to Dave and his approach and willingness to go above and beyond. Officer Casal has also taken the lead in bringing a focus on officer wellness to our department. He is committed to making himself available to other officers in need, even those from other departments. Dave is a certified peer counselor and is trained to be a resource to officers who are processing through a traumatic event. In addition, in his off hours, he volunteers for Guardian Revival, a nonprofit which connects first responders and veterans to a variety of support options. Dave, who is a talented musician, uses his passion for music as a gateway to connect with current and former Guardians. I expect he will continue to bring these traits to his new responsibilities as supervisor, and I am pleased to recommend him for the position of sergeant without reservation. Here tonight in support of Dave are extended family, friends, present and former coworkers, and members of our Pleasantville community. Most importantly, however, Sergeant Casal is being accompanied tonight by his daughter, Julia, who will be pinning her dad with his new sergeant's shield. Thank you.
Dave, if I can ask you to arise, raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, David Casal,
I, David Casal,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of New York,
the Constitution of the State of New York,
the codes of the Village of Pleasantville,
the codes of the Village of Pleasantville,
and that I will fulfill my duties
and I will fulfill my duties
as a sergeant for the Pleasantville Police Department
as a sergeant for the Pleasantville Police Department
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
Sergeant Casal, congratulations. This is your moment to poke him.
I won't, not exactly poke him. Okay, I know. Okay. If I could try. Okay, don't poke, don't stab. I hope I didn't start you.
No, that's good.
Beautiful. Well, congratulations to you, congratulations to your family and to your colleagues who have come here. I couldn't be happier to see you elevated to this role and couldn't be happier to think that we've locked you in for an eternity to continue to deliver the skills that you have delivered so faithfully to the village. And as a quick shout out, perhaps you will be an inspiration to your colleagues and we'll see other musicians on stage within the department, right?
I wish.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Congratulations. I'm just gonna go around the room and thank them. So we will, as we often do in these moments, take our resolutions out of order and then return to them later. Paul, if you could read resolution number 28.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees, based on the recommendation of the Chief of Police, hereby appoints David Casal to Police Sergeant, job title code 133, at a salary of $143,704, effective January 22nd, 2024.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. There were no dissents. Welcome, Sergeant Casal. Congratulations. So we can take a quick break if you'd like to get some pictures with family, with colleagues, whatever. So and then we'll return to the driest dust remaining of our meeting. Which you're welcome to sit for.
Oh, I need that.
Sorry.
Thanks, have a seat. What's gonna happen?
Did you stand? That's pretty nice.
I was
Very
taking it all in. I do it.
I do video and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Boy, buddy. Good to see you, Jack. We'll return to our regular meeting following the promotion to Sergeant of David Casal. Congratulations again to him. Is there any comment from the public on any subject at this time? Zoom attendee, you can raise your hand. I see none. All right. The chief will be back in a moment, and the next item on our agenda is his 2023 fourth quarter update as part of our program of quarterly updates from the chief about the goings on in the department. But while he completes the festivities with Sergeant Casal and his family, let me just make a couple of announcements. First is so many people have commented, I think, to all of us and to the village staff about the success of this year's holiday lights. Really looked great all the way around. A big thank you to Kathy Dinkle and the beautification committee. Kathy was the prime mover to try to get us to up our game on the lighting front, as she has been on so many other things. She and her team on beautification are responsible for the wreaths and the various decorations that are around the village. So a big thank you for that. And we're going to leave those up for a while, Eric.
Yes, still probably about mid-February.
To try to brighten this otherwise dark and cold time. It certainly has made the village look great. So thanks to Mike Newman, Mario, the whole team at Parks and DPW. I know played a significant role in making it possible to get that all done, even though we had an outside contractor, a whole lot of assistance was provided. So really look great. Wanted to comment about last Monday's Martin Luther King service. The Interfaith Clergy Association convened, as they did last year, a Martin Luther King event that took place at St. John's. Nicole was there. There was representation from the synagogue, Holy Innocents, from the Lutheran Church, Presbyterian Church, the Upper Westchester Muslim Society, and a number of community speakers as well. I really thought a moving event, and very much appreciated that they organized that. And I just encourage folks to keep an eye out when Martin Luther King Day rolls around next year to consider attending and participating. So,
Yeah, it was a lovely event.
I also just want to make a quick comment. There was some back and forth on Facebook about the potential costs of the pool. I think in part generated by our What's Up Pleasantville reporting that we are uncertain about the degree of escalation we've encountered in the cost of rebuilding the pool. But we are certain that a significant chunk of money is going to have to be spent on flood mitigation, which we've sort of found out the hard way in the recent very difficult storms. And that gave rise to some conversation about, well, what if we didn't have a pool? Maybe we could instead use the same money and a little more to build a rec center. I just want to be clear that there are a whole series of issues attached to that, but the idea of trading a pool for a rec center is not a 1-for-1, even likely a 2-for-1 trade in dollars. The latter is a very, very much more expensive venture. And not only very much more expensive to create, but very much more expensive likely to continue to operate on a yearly basis. And lastly, the possibility of building such a thing on the site of an existing pool is remote at best, because we're dealing with a site that's already significantly affected by water and flooding, that is adjacent to wetlands and riparian buffer, a whole series of issues that would suggest there's really no likelihood that one could build anything there other than what we already have. So have I covered that fairly, do you think, Eric?
I think so.
Yeah, so I just wanted to make clear to people that these are matters that we all think about all the time, and I certainly am not at all sorry to have people talking about these ideas. And obviously we'll all talk about the potential cost of the pool when we actually are able to pin it down through bids, which will occur at some point later this year. But we're not talking about the opportunity to build a rec center if we didn't build a pool. So, lastly, even if we don't do anything to the pool, we're certainly going to be on the hook for some flood mitigation issues. And even if we decided to remove the pool and not build anything there, flood mitigation would still be required. So
Plus, not having pool and closing the pool would cost a substantial sum as well.
no doubt. To remove it, to mitigate the site, and add to that, as we've discussed in the past, a whole series of programmatic issues, including the service it provides to so many families who have used it for many generations, and its role for our day camp, et cetera. So lots to be said about that. I just wanted to throw that one out there because I do know there was chattering about it in various directions going on Facebook.
And also, you add that, it's kind of difficult to know exact numbers and percentage of what people would use a pool and what people don't use a pool, and numbers like that to just put out there, I think is a bit premature, because you're not really accounting for it. You may think that perhaps, only maybe children use it, or children, but you're not thinking about the fact that, as we run camp out there. So all of the families that rely on the camp, and it's a camp that is very cost effective. You compare it to private camps all over, you aren't going to go here significantly amount. And that's just affecting all of our working families, because they're going to have to figure out what they do with their children who normally be at school for at least almost 2 months. And so I think that, to kind of come out with a number in any way and just say, there's only a small percentage of people that use this, so we should really think about it. I think there is no number. I think it's discussions that need to be had, but I think it's definitely premature to get a number of how many people are using it. So I think that's an important thing that I want to know.
Thank you for that, Paul. As I think those of you who followed this whole discussion over the last several years know that there was a significant citizen committee and surveys done there's tremendous support for the pool, and honestly, we're talking about preserving a recreation amenity that we've had for a very, very long time. So, that isn't to say we don't worry every single day about the potential cost of this, and that isn't to say that the cost of it based on current supply chain, current inflation, current bond rates, et cetera, might make it necessary for us to delay or shelve this idea. At the moment, we're continuing, as we have been for the last several years, to build out this plan, to build into it the flood mitigation that will be clearly essential as part of this. And when we have all that data in hand, we'll be confronted with some likely difficult decisions. So enough on that. As we have commented in recent meetings, as you all no doubt have seen in your own world, the combination of COVID, flu, and RSV is an unfortunate winter trifecta with lots of people affected. And I just encourage folks to get vaccines and also to be attentive. And certainly, if you're feeling ill, be careful about it. A whole lot of stuff flying around in these winter months. Couple of dates coming down the pike. We have a village election for mayor and 2 trustee seats. That is occurring on Tuesday, March 19. The petition collection process is going on right now, and by mid-February, the ballot will be clear. But I encourage folks to keep an eye out, both through us and through the Examiner and other news sources, to stay in touch with the village election, and then stay in touch with the conversation that surround it, to understand what people think about various subjects and to engage in. And then the last date I had on the list here is to remind folks that the music festival will be taking place on Saturday, July 13. You can go to pleasantvillemusicfestival.com and you can buy your tickets now, which is significant cost advantage because the tickets are discounted this early in the game. So pleasantvillemusicfestival.com. Soon enough, I guess we'll have a date for Tent City sales. Has that been settled yet? Not yet. So, Tent City, is, very, very, very popular. And, so if you're interested in that, you just need to, make sure you're on the Pleasantville Music Festival mailing list, which you can do at that website I mentioned, and stay in touch with it. So,
Do we still wanna? Maybe it's not the appropriate time for a question.
well, since we're waiting for the chief to come back.
With Tent City, I know there's this illustrious tradition that reminds me of when Crazy Eddie was an electronics retailer, sleeping on the pavement the night before to get the prime positions for Tent City. Yeah, which is perfectly understandable, but may not be perfectly or equally available to all families. Is there any way we would consider doing like an internet lottery type or physical lottery if it's express their interest and then be given a random selection order?
Yeah, I can bring that up to Bruce, the festival director, to see if that's something that they can pull off. Absolutely.
Some upset people, just bring that up.
For sure. I mean, there are upset people now though, so, you know.
There are,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of this stuff that seems good in theory, but then the family that doesn't have somebody to watch the kids and, you know, like
Yeah, I
whatever
get it.
doesn't have the same entitlement,
Yeah.
you know, it's not always as easy for them and they don't always feel like their upsetness is as relevant as the family who can do this.
Sure.
So this conversation to be had, I will say, you know, there, as you likely know, is there are sort of neighborhoods in Tent City that have evolved in generations of folks who try to get tents together and are really have been very committed supporters of the music festival for a very, very long time. And so that will be a concern if we thought about all of that, just as Nicole said. So conversation worthy to be had, to be sure. All right, we need to rescue the chief from his
I'll go grab them.
social activities in the foyer,
Or we could just pass all the bills.
or we can do his.
Yeah. Right on down, can we do it? I have to peel them away from the camera.
All right, so next on our agenda is the quarterly report from Chief Grutzner, part of our series of quarterly reports from the police chief about the activities and goings on at the police department in order to improve people's awareness of what goes on and to improve community communication. So, Eric, should we move the mic back to Eric?
Yeah.
So, Chief, welcome. And again, congratulations on what is a very nice night for the department to see one of our own elevated dispatches.
Absolutely. Extremely well deserved. You know, Dave previously, as everyone who gets promoted does, you know, thanked me for the position. I told him, Dave, you absolutely earned this. He's been an incredible resource for us inside the department and for the community for the last, you know, going on 7 years with the special needs liaison officer, and just his general approach to the way he does his job is a breath of fresh air. So we're very lucky to have him. We're very excited to be able to promote him. So,
all right, you let me know when you're ready. I should share my screen.
We are ready.
Here I go. All right.
Wonderful. So, calls for service, again, I'm trying to avoid on these presentations, you know, like as I've said before, I want to have some uniformity so that people know what to expect when I come up here, but at the same time, I don't necessarily want to bore you with the same rote information. So some of the stuff is for display purposes only, for people to come back and potentially refer to. But we had what we believe to be a relatively typical quarter of police activity. Next. You'll see our level of activity. We're going to touch base a little bit more on some of these things a little bit in our goal setting area. But you see some relatively constant. You did see the uptick in Q4. We do subscribe some of that to the beginning of the snow ordinance enforcement that we do every year that starts in December. So that'll be part of that number.
It does look like there's a year-on-year decline and a quarterly decline in the actual number of arrests. Is that a statistically significant change?
I think that is, again, something we'll touch on a little bit in the goals setting. But yes, we think there are reasons for it. And we think that, although, listen, maybe it's counterintuitive to think that a police chief is happy that we have fewer arrests.
I would think everybody should be.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You know,
Probably the people who were doing.
so, yeah, and again, I will touch on this long, but you know, tickets and arrests are some of the metrics that we have traditionally used as measuring sticks for police officers and their productivity. We don't subscribe to that model necessarily. We feel like there are much more important ways to measure the job that we're doing. We feel that we are successful, but we also don't want to lose track of the fact that enforcement is an important part of what we do. It has a deterrent effect. It does potentially, when people know, and again, I don't want to use enforcement necessarily as the end result being a ticket or an arrest or a summons or something like that, but when people know their police departments are active and are engaged in the community, whether it is enforcement or community relations or anything else in between, we think that benefits the community. For them to know, that they are supporting a department that is supporting them as well. But we do recognize that, you know, and we encourage officers to be proactive, think differently, think beyond the fact of numbers. If I ever had an officer come to me and say, hey, listen, I really want to write more tickets, or that, you know, that's really not what we're trying to do here. So, but we will discuss that in more detail a little bit later on. Next. So community policing, obviously, we were very concerned about community policing. We're constantly trying to find new ways to engage with our community. We had 2 Coffee with a Cop events. Coffee with a Cop is usually open to the public. We did have a couple in the past. We've had some public events. They are not as well attended as maybe we had thought, but we have used that model to connect greatly with some of the people at both Select Human Services and the Nicholas Center as an opportunity for us to, it's an informal breaking down, you know, Coffee with a Cop. The model is the officers are there, we're sharing a cup of coffee, we're having a conversation.
How do you advertise this?
Yeah, that's what I was asking.
So these were just private events. We used the Coffee with a Cop model, but it wasn't advertised to the public. They were at those locations, and obviously there would be concerns about, the private areas, private facilities hosting a public event like that. But, like I said, it's not something we've necessarily made a priority here because of so Coffee with a Cop is designed to create opportunities for interaction between civilians and our officers. We know we get that already, those interactions. Does a Coffee with a Cop event potentially create a new pathway? Potentially. But like I said, in the past, when we've done it publicly, we don't feel.
You wanna try one and have us promote it and see what happens?
Sure. I mean, we can, if the board is interested in having another one, absolutely. Sure. We can do that. Yeah.
Because we haven't, as far as I know, since I've been here, there's never been one that's promoted on social channels, for instance. So you may get different people, even if you do get people already engaging with the force. I think it's good to make some connections between like PTA people and, different people who may not already be in touch with them.
Right.
I
Sure. I
think
mean,
the idea of having it be somewhat targeted makes sense, right? Like, something like the Nicholas Center is obviously like, you already have a rapport with them and so on, but you mentioned the PTA, like, obviously you guys could just be open to the general public, but I wonder if you might not get a bigger showing if it were a little bit more targeted. I don't know. Like,
When in more targeted subject area.
We can try a different.
Yeah.
or more targeted, yeah.
and there's nothing wrong with trying it both ways. We can have one that's public and open to the public and open to everybody. And then potentially if there's a group that we think.
There'd be a calendar of something every day.
Yeah, absolutely. Next, as usual, I feel sometimes that I'm boring you with talking about our walkthroughs, and the interaction that we have with the school, but it is critical to our success. It's critical to our relationship with the community. And so I highlight it, every chance I get. Next, please. Oh, all right. So, again, in the threshold of community events, if you notice number 55 there in the second row, that is James Charletti, who is currently one of our detectives, but at the time was, I think he was a linebacker. Pretty sure he was a linebacker with the Pleasantville football team. So fast forward, if you want to go to the next slide. Fast forward, if you look there in the back with the black hat on, that is Detective Charletti now with this year's football team at homecoming against Sleepy Hollow. So, kind of a full circle moment there for Detective Charletti, who played on the Pleasantville football team. We have, as you know, a number of our officers are Pleasantville residents, went through the schools here. And so we have that connection. And obviously, when we extend those relationships and find different opportunities to interact with people, it creates a commonality that we're very proud of and we're very excited about. Next. Same Detective Charletti participated in a public Narcan training at the Mount Pleasant Public Library. Obviously, Narcan, naloxone is an incredible tool that we carry. The officers carry whenever they're on patrol. We've had great success with it. Again, talking in a few minutes, we have an opportunity to maybe do something different going forward in the coming year that we're going to be exploring to bring again this incredibly important and life-saving tool to the general public and to the community. Next, please. So some calls of note. Usually when obviously there's a lot of activity. And so for me, I like to find specific incidents to bring to your attention, to bring the public's attention, in which really there's a reason I'm bringing these up. And in this case, this was a great piece of investigative work for the officers, but it was also a wonderful job of the woman who made this call. Basically, she observes someone making graffiti on the overpass over the Sawmill Bridge past 7-Eleven out towards Pace. She calls it in. By the time we are in the area, the officers find a man fitting the description. I don't want to go too deep into the investigative process, but this woman stayed with us, continued to cooperate with the investigation to the point where we eventually made an arrest. The tags that the person was making matched other tags that had been in the downtown area. So we think that with that community partnership and with that participation from a member of our community, we were able to take down somebody who was on multiple occasions making graffiti in the downtown area. So we're very proud, obviously, of the of the outcome of the case, but also, excuse me, in the ability to work so closely with members of our community. Next. So I do want to take a few minutes to talk about overtime, as we do every quarter. You'll see there's a spike, an increase in the numbers of overtime. If you look back over the year, and we've talked about this before in overtime presentations, the main driving factor, if you want to go to the next slide, the main driving factor for our overtime is what we call tour coverage. Tour coverage is driven by personnel, plain and simple. We did lose an officer transferred out of the department in October. And as a result, some of the benefits that we were seeing as far as our low overtime numbers, we came back. This is also November and December. These are high vacation times. December, we were hit hard with illnesses in our department, as a lot of workplaces were. We asked a lot of our officers, they stepped up. You know, those who were healthy were here, but unfortunately, going down one officer from the roster and then losing people to illness and vacations and things like that, we did see a spike in the overtime. We are expecting, I will say, for year to date, we are about where we would expect to be on overtime, and hopefully within the next couple of weeks, I may be in front of you again, bringing in some new employees, asking for your consideration on a new hire. So, although we did see an increase from quarter to quarter, regards to tour overtime, we hope we have reinforcements coming, and we expect that this quarter, obviously quarter one tends to be a bit of a down quarter. If you noticed last year, from the red to the blue, there was that significant decrease. There's just not as many vacation times as much vacation time taken in the first quarter as there is in the fourth. And so we expect, like I said, we're in a good place where we are budget-wise for the overtime, and we expect to hopefully realize some decreases in our overtime numbers.
And then Chief, just so for clarity, the new hires, we are currently down to 2 officers. So those would be, they're not new positions, they're back.
We're backfilling to get to our stated goals, to where we have been in the past. Again, same information, just a different graphic to show a little bit sort of how significant our tour coverage, which is that bottom light blue color, and how much of a driver for our overtime that is. Some other things that we have in there, special events, a significant amount of special events as we usually have through the fall and in the beginning of the winter around the holidays. Arrest and case overtime, school guard overtime. I'll touch on school guards in just a second, but as we know how school guard overtime is generated, and we regularly looking to the community for their help. If anyone is considering the process of becoming a school guard, we strongly encourage that. We did have some training, which we'll talk about a little bit, and then our field training numbers declined because our officer had exited field training by this quarter. So next, please. As I was saying, school guard staffing is a constant issue. Always looking for new people, even if it's potentially on a ad hoc basis. If you can be a fill-in, we will absolutely take you. The training is minimal. The background check is, we try to make it as painless as possible. But you know, obviously we pay competitively for that position to the rest of the county, and we feel it's a unique opportunity for people to serve their community, stay in touch. So we're always looking for someone who's willing to step up and be a school guard. Hopefully we're through some of the cold weather and it's going to get nicer, and by March or April, it's actually enjoyable to be out there for an hour and a half in the morning and in the afternoon. Some training that we attended, we sent Sergeant Holly and Officer Cole Hatcher to the New York State Women in Law Enforcement Conference. That's something we've done for the last couple of years. And that's something we feel they get a great benefit out of, and it's a benefit to the department. Lieutenant Woolman and Lieutenant Gilmartin participated in a leadership summit with NYSACOP. NYSACOP is the New York State Association of Chiefs of Police. Again, we'll talk a little bit about goals in a little while, and then I'll tie into that. Next, please. You've heard Guardian Revival in my comments about Dave Casale. You'll hear more about them again before the evening is done. It's a not-for-profit. It was started by a former Navy SEAL, very committed to making sure that first responders, veterans have access to mental health services and supports. And so they put together and provided an opportunity at the Paramount Theater in Peekskill one day in November. Speakers, testimony from people who've got lived experience in these things, and really advertising what they do and how well they do it. So it's a not-for-profit that we are increasing our partnership with, and we're very proud to be able to do that. Next, please. Lieutenant Woolman and Sergeant Zane participated in the Westchester County Domestic Violence Symposium. That was a county-wide event that was sponsored by the Chiefs of Police Association, in addition to a number of other speakers. It's a yearly event, and it is extremely well attended and extremely important for us to stay as current as we can in regards to that particular type of call that we go on. And then Sergeant Holly attended to a two-day de-escalation training. Not that we haven't had all of our officers trained in de-escalation, but we consider it to be something that is absolutely worth sending officers for different varieties of de-escalation. De-escalation is a skill set. Obviously, we have the opportunity to practice it sometimes on a daily basis, but learning new skills, learning new ways to accomplish the goals is something we take very seriously. Next. So we had an opportunity this quarter to participate in low light work. So we had the opportunity to get into the Girl Scout building, and so we used our final training day of the year in that facility. We did it during the day, did some of it at night, but even during the day, we were able to create low light atmospheres. Obviously, a significant number of police encounters with people take place in low light situations. It's not something that we have the opportunity to train because it's difficult. But simunitions are basically, for lack of a better term, they're paintball pellets. So the weapons look and feel exactly as ours do, but they fire paint rounds. And so we had role players, officers who were acting as role players, different scenarios, whether it was room clearing, whether it was dealing with people in emotional distress, or having some sort of episode. The officers were basically sent in, you got a call, this is what you've been told, this is what the person reported, and then you would walk into a room and see a person and have to interact with them and deal with them. So, not the kind of training that we normally have the opportunity to provide, but between the location, Sergeant Zane, Officer Alonzo, a couple other officers were involved in participating in that training, and every member, including myself, of the department went through that training in December. And it was, many people said it was some of the best training that they've been to in a long time.
So we're gonna be getting a request for Gen 3 night vision goggles for the.
Well, I mean, it is budget season, so. So just to talk about some of the projects that we're working on, I'm touching on body worn cameras. If you've seen the officers, you see that we're wearing them. They're fully in use. The officers have embraced them. The back of the house sort of concerns that we had, not concerns, but the work that has to go on to not only have the video, but also to log it and to tag it so that we can search it, and it's all moving seamlessly. We're very appreciative of the work that we did. Obviously, some of that was funded by a grant that we received, but a lot of that was also with the support of the board, and for that, we're very, very appreciative. Next, accreditation. Again, this is a topic that we're going to talk about going forward for the next probably 2 years. It's the timeline that we've laid out. Still a work in progress. We are without a doubt convinced that we are still on the same timeline as forever. We are learning as we go. However, that sometimes it's not as easy as we thought it was going to be. But the commitment is still full, and we are still expecting to finish on time. Next. Our records management system. Again, we had the opportunity to go into a consortium with 14 other police departments here in Westchester County. Westchester County is the lead agency there. It is a department, it's one of their IT departments, capital projects that they're working on. So Lieutenant Gilmartin has spent a great deal of time working with counterparts from those other departments. Currently, they're working through basically the company that we used so the go live date was supposed to be March of this year. We do not believe that we're going to meet that target date, but everything is still on track. They had a bit of a technical glitch that they're working out. So we are still using our current system. We are just a little bit delayed on the training and the implementation of the new system, but we still expect all the terms are the same. The county's picking up the cost for this. Again, these projects, you would think it's a record management system. It can't be that expensive. Believe me, it is. We are excited for when we get the new records management system and the opportunity it's going to give us to more seamlessly search and chronicle what it is we do every day. But for right now, although there's been no formal announcement, we think that it'll probably be pushed off a little bit from March. We don't think we'll be ready in 2 months. So next, our radio communications capital project. Again, great support from the board. Very appreciative of that. We have ordered the portable radios. So the radio system is based up of the portable radios, which the officers carry on their hip. Mobile radios are the radios that go in the cars. And then there's obviously infrastructure in headquarters that we're doing. So we submitted the first PO, which will include some of the infrastructure as well as the portable radios. When those are here, they need to be programmed by the MTA. Again, this is in partnership with the MTA. So we are working on that track. We are also working on the infrastructure downstairs track, as well as a couple other things a couple other pieces that we need to put together. We're moving forward. We don't necessarily have a timetable only because we have so many partners working on it, but we're very excited about potentially those portable radios we can switch over or maintain our current, the functionality of the radios is incredible. But we'll have the opportunity to either remain on our current infrastructure or go to the MTA's infrastructure with the opportunity to potentially improve our reception as time goes on and other projects fall into place. So a quick review, we're going to move to department goals and all the things that I said we're going to talk about later. This is when we're going to talk about it. So these are our goals for 2023. We wanted to continue our community engagement. We believe we did that. We obviously our walkthroughs, as we talked about, we had 146 blotters of community relations. So that's a significant number of times that we made it a point to spend time in the community doing nothing but community relations. So we targeted that. If you look on our public blotters, if you've been following the public blotters, you'll see that a number of our calls are community related. We've also instituted and continue to be committed to a walking post in the downtown area. And that is something that we think is extremely important, and we'll continue to work on that in 2024. Mental health and substance abuse disorder. I'm going to put those two things together. I was just at a training seminar, again, which will come up in a little bit this week and last week, pardon me. And really, when we talked about, it was a group of chiefs from around the area talking about how so many of our calls now are either domestic in nature, substance abuse, or mental health calls. That is what we do. It's not just Pleasantville, it's not just Westchester, it's everywhere. And because those three things are so undeniably intertwined, it almost becomes difficult to sort of sort them out. But we have continued our partnership with the Mobile Crisis Response Team, which is obviously been incredibly helpful. We've sent officers to the 911 diversion class, that training, which potentially takes the officers away from responding to what is an obvious non-criminal, non-safety related mental health call. So our officers are trained to be able to do that. And then substance abuse disorder. Again, we have partnerships, which we're going to continue with, whether it's the Mobile Crisis Response Team, whether it's Hope Not Handcuffs. Officer wellness, as I talked about, we attended the Officer Wellness Summit and continue to provide opportunities for our officers to train and participate in wellness opportunities. And then succession planning. Last year, we started a process whereby we wanted to make sure that people were doing things that they might be asked to do, might be their responsibility in the future, that they started to have the opportunity to do now. So we expanded who we put on an interview committee. We thought that was an important thing for people to start to see sort of how we onboard people. We didn't want people just to get to know someone once they'd already been hired. So we had sergeants and members of the union sitting in on our interview panels. In addition, we talked about some of the training that we sent different officers to in the fields of leadership and things such as that. So for 2024, we're going to continue our community outreach goal. So Hope Not Handcuffs, we partnered with Hope Not Handcuffs about 2 or 3 years ago, along with 14 other agencies here in Westchester County. It was a great step in for them. One of the things that we feel we can do better on is, so Hope Not Handcuffs provides a safe haven for people to come to the police department and ask for help. And we contact Hope Not Handcuffs. They provide them with an angel, and that person gets them placed into rehab immediately. The problem is we really hadn't had many people coming in and asking for that help. We think we have an idea why that is. We think that has to do with a number of different factors. But regardless, we want to make sure that we are still reaching out to people. So we're going to begin doing visits. We know people in the community. We know who might benefit from it. We understand and anticipate that many people will not say yes when we first come to them. But depending on the circumstances that we come to know people, we feel like letting them know that we care about them, letting them know that there are those, we can't wait for them to come to us. We have to go to them. So that's one of our goals for this year. Secondly, as we talked about Narcan, there is a countywide program in which officers at the scene, whether it's an overdose or some other scene in which there's an understanding or a belief that there may be opioid use or abuse going on in the household, we'll have to do some work, but the officers will be able to potentially leave behind naloxone. So as I said before, we carry it, we have it in all of our cars for our response. But we think the best thing that can happen is potentially officers have the opportunity to leave it with a family member. We know that it's an insurance policy, and we want to potentially have the ability to leave that with people moving forward. Next. All right, so we talked a little bit about enforcement. Mr. Vingemore, you asked sort of about those things. So we recognize that our enforcement numbers are down. And we believe that's for a multitude of reasons. COVID changed the way we do our jobs. We still think, and this lines up with other places and other departments, there's still a lingering effect from COVID. We don't know that the community is necessarily ready for us to be back to the way that we were before COVID. We think COVID was not necessarily just a dip. It might have actually been a swerve, right? Things are kind of different now after COVID. In addition, we think our enforcement numbers are down because a lot of the laws have changed. Some things that were previously illegal are no longer legal. Do you have a question?
Yeah, could you expand on the COVID piece? I'm just curious. I don't know what you mean by things have changed in policing because of COVID.
So
Just curious.
We believe people have different expectations of their police. We think that because we went probably 18 months without really doing enforcement, that has lingered a little bit for the officers. I think, self-initiated enforcement is as much a product of culture as it is anything else. And again, some of the other reasons I think tie into it, but we feel as if our relationship with the community has changed. We feel that people's belief in what their government should and shouldn't be doing has probably changed. We think COVID is probably what started that conversation. Not maybe as much as some other fields, but we changed within a very short period of time from what we did on a regular basis to what we now do on a regular basis. And again, none of this prohibits, or it's sort of just, where's the tide? The tide sort of was high prior to COVID, and now maybe the tide has gone out a little bit as far as what the community expectations are. and what our expectations have been on our officers for the last few years.
This is sort of a hard conversation to understand in absence of knowing what the background is with crime itself. So for instance, if crime is going down, then enforcement going down is great, right? There's nothing bad about fewer people committing crimes and fewer people being arrested. Is that fair to say?
Sure.
But what is the background?
Well, so when we talk about enforcement, and again, there's more to the point of this. We're talking about arrests. Usually these are more petty offenses. We're not talking about significant crimes. That's not what we talk about when we talk about enforcement. We're talking about officers self-initiating to go out and find people doing things they shouldn't be doing, whether it's a traffic enforcement,
Right.
whether it's potential quality of life enforcement in the downtown area, things like that. So when we talk about things like that, whether the crime has necessarily gone up or down, I think in a lot of ways becomes a factor of what it is we enforce, right? I mean, we won't.
Well, you're not creating crime, so
Like
it has to be
Schrodinger's
going on in the
cat.
background. I mean, are you saying there's no way to measure it unless you're enforcing it? Or it's not that you're only arresting somebody if they're breaking a law, whether it's a misdemeanor or a felon, right? So that is crime by definition. And I'm just saying, like, is there any way that you're measuring? Is there more graffiti? Is there more speeding? Is there more, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, so we haven't begun to really measure our statistics that way. I mean, we don't have a number,
Because I feel like you have to justify to us that you're arresting fewer people, and I would think like we'd all be celebrating unless we thought that was in the context of more people acting out or more people doing things that are not desirable in our community, and I don't perceive that at all.
so I think maybe this is a bit more of an old school mentality.
Yeah.
On a personal note, when I first started here, as many young officers who come here did, I thought to myself, I'm bored. There's nothing, the radio's not going off. I'm not constantly chasing criminals. That's what I thought I was gonna do when I became a police officer. That's a criminal.
I may or may not say that I might have ran through some woods. You're behind me, you're by. Did you
But-
catch him?
Yeah.
It was very nice, very courteous.
And what you learn is that it's always out there. There's always something to find. It's just how hard are you going to look for it? If you sit, and again, this will tie in, if you sit with your lights on in a place in the downtown area, being a deterrent, well, you're not going to end up doing really enforcement. You're not going to produce anything. You have to sort of change your ability. So that's really what we're talking about. When I say enforcement, I should be more clear. I mean self-initiated enforcement on relatively minor offenses. The kind of stuff that, listen, if we have an officer who's aggressively enforcing the downtown area, is that the kind of thing that necessarily changes the complexion of the town? Like, it's not really necessarily for that. And that's why it's not something that's intelligence led. It's more driven by the officers, driven by the perception of the officers of what is the best way to handle the problem. Sometimes the best thing you can do on a busy night is to be very obvious. You know you're not going to potentially issue a summons for drinking in public or issue a summons for urinating in public, but you're going to have the ability to hopefully people walk out of a bar and maybe they were going to do something silly. And they decide, oh, you know what, the officer's right there, I'm not going to do that. So it's a balancing act, right? But at some point, if you're always in the same spot, always being a deterrent, people sort of take you for granted. And now they know as soon as I go around the corner, I can do that silly thing because the officer's not there. So we want people to not only have it, see it with their eyes, but also know it in their mind that we potentially could be anywhere. And part of the way that you are able to do that is through enforcement. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean, and I will say this, many minor violations. I personally did not enforce. I might catch somebody, I might use that opportunity to start a conversation with that person, but enforcement of minor violations wasn't always necessarily something that we hung our hats on. But we do believe that
And thus Paul is here today, right?
yeah.
Stand up citizen.
Yeah, we do believe, yes. We think that part of the reason that there is, less petty crime enforcement is because the town has significantly changed. We don't have some of the, excuse me, nightlife options, opportunities as we did 25, 30 years ago. Excuse me. So there are a number of factors. We recognize there are a number of factors. What we want to do is always empower our officers to be committed to recognizing, having the tools to be not only the deterrent, but also potentially the enforcement.
But I guess what I'm asking is, shouldn't you think about it the opposite way? Shouldn't you say, look, here is the number of complaints coming into us about people behaving in ways that they shouldn't behave around the town, about damage to property, about, interpersonal conflicts, noise, etc. And use that as the mosaic to say, we're sort of in balance. Oh, now it's getting a little bit out of balance. And now when it's getting out of balance, we're not enforcing and we're not visible, etc. Now we know we have a problem, but otherwise you should be happy if you're arresting fewer people, because in the context of a town that feels like it's not out of control and things are not getting worse, etc., that means that it's working. Whatever you're doing is working.
So first of all, I very much appreciate this conversation because you're giving me a perspective that I probably didn't have.
Yeah.
I will say this, I don't know if this addresses the topic you're bringing up, but I believe that because what we're talking about is more of a transient population, that by transient, what I mean is we're not talking about neighborhoods, we're talking about downtown. We're talking about people who maybe are here on a regular basis, or maybe they're just kind of one time. And whether that's traffic enforcement or quality of life enforcement. So, I don't know if, I literally don't know if this community has the ability to, let's put it this way. I know when I hear that something happened on the overnight, I think to myself, how could we have potentially prevented that? When a window gets broken, when a fight happens,
Sure.
when it's, I don't know. And again, I'm sort of in my very linear sort of experience thinking. I never want to be the kind of department that just says we're going to enforce our way out of it. If everybody knows as soon as you walk out on the street and you've done anything wrong, the cop's going to be there and he's going to give you a hard time. So that'll keep, we know that doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So we want to be different. What I'm looking more for is to give, we have it listed as a goal because this is where we're going to focus our training, focus our resources. And so I'll give you one of the examples that we talked about downstairs. So DWI enforcement is down in the village. Pardon me, correct that. The number of arrests for driving while intoxicated is down over time in the village. That mirrors what is going on in the state. There's Uber now. There's all sorts of, there's great messaging that's out there. I mean, 25 years ago, I think 20 years ago, I think they said 1 out of 8 drivers on a Friday or Saturday night was legally intoxicated. That was the numbers that they were coming up with. Those numbers are not the same. And when I go talk to the Governor's Traffic Safety Council and they come back and they say, how come nobody's making DWI arrests? We say, because there aren't any, you've done a great job in messaging out, you can't drink and drive. However, I still want my officers out there looking for people who shouldn't be driving because they've either had too much to drink or they've had some other drugs. But that's going to require some training. That's going to require, I need to know what resources do we need. Some of these resources we don't have. We don't have a field test for marijuana. As we do for alcohol and as we do for other things. But I want my officers, I've tasked Lieutenant Gilmartin with going to his sergeants and having them go to their officers and saying, what is it you need? And if somebody feels, all of the officers got the standard field sobriety training in the past. I shouldn't say all, most of them should have in the academy. Most of the officers who are on the road now should have had that training in the academy, but that might have been 10 years ago. Do you need a refresher? Do you need something? What will make you more confident? What is it that we can do to encourage, to change the culture, to improve the culture when it comes to enforcement on driving while intoxicated?
In terms of this year,
Mhm.
2024, it's an election year. And this is a year where, because of some of the national personalities involved, I think there is the potential for more hate crimes. And there's the potential for more violence against specific groups of people. Are you starting to think about that as we go into the summer and the fall in particular?
Yes, that's absolutely something that we're considering. We're seeing that especially with county and state partners. We're constantly updated on what the trends are, what the where things are going, what the concerns are. We expect this to be a tumultuous year, if for no other reason, even if it's not specifically something like that, but just these types of scenarios sort of breed tumultuousness. So yes, we are continuing to work on that, and that's constantly top of mind. Absolutely.
So segue a little bit, kind of talking about just being on the lookout. Abby Louie from the Examiner wrote me and she said she couldn't raise a question on the chat, but she asked if you would be able to comment on the nature of the threat made today at the Mount Pleasant Library by the young person that caused the Pleasantville schools to be placed on lockout.
So I don't want to talk too much about that because we're still investigating. We're still working on that case. The statement that we put out earlier today is probably about as far as I would go. I will say this, there was not a specific threat that was made, but something that was of concern was said. We thought it was appropriate to immediately try to find out who that person was and what it was they meant by that statement. The schools followed their protocol that, with any risk, and the schools obviously have this worked out, have their protocols in place. But when there's a threat outside of the school, they go into lockout. That's the school's decision to make that determination that that's what they want to do. I think it highlighted a great deal the continued cooperation that we have with the school. It was very much a team effort between the police department, the village, and the schools. Again, the specifics, I don't really think it's appropriate to go into at this point. But again, once we completed the investigation, we were able to determine that there really was never a direct threat to the community. I don't want to say it was a misunderstanding. I would say probably that this was as good an outcome as I don't want to say it was as good as an outcome, because I'm trying not to say something that leaves a big question in the public's mind. In the end, we felt that once the person was identified, we're confident that all the necessary and appropriate protocols were followed.
And as you said in your statement, the person who was identified as a minor, and that very much affects the appropriateness of what is allowed to be said.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
So briefly, another, yes.
What we were talking about, you talked about DWIs and you brought up the lack of a field test for marijuana. I'm just curious, now that you bring it up, we're a couple of years into legalization and we haven't talked much about that here. Have you seen effects? Do you have data on changes in Pleasantville? Has anything changed, or how does it look from your perspective?
So
Whether about like public use or driving or things that are a concern,
So it's a very layered conversation. I've said publicly before, and I think this is probably echoed by most of the chiefs in New York State. None of us really ever had a problem with personal use marijuana in a private home or in private settings. It's difficult to deal with some of the impacts of that. You know, for instance, when we smell alcohol in a car or on a person, we know exactly what that means. Marijuana, we don't have that luxury or that liberty. It could be anything. So, you know, I don't necessarily have data if there were specific things that we were looking for. It's, you know, this community is like any other. The prevalence of marijuana is in the community. How it impacts and affects us, I think we're still, even still to this day, we're still sort of finding out. I mean, I'll say this, I have you guys like asking me questions about stuff that I've done. Let's put it this way,
where's the crowd?
yeah, I would say, along with intoxicated driving and people driving high, my great concern is still sale to minors. These laws were passed with the belief that this would be in the hands of adults. I don't believe it's marketed to adults. I think it's making it far too easy for this. Not that kids didn't get marijuana before, I'm not saying that, but I think, and I don't mean this culturally, that's a whole other conversation. I just think it's now so much more available in so many different forms that I'm greatly concerned about not only kids and marijuana, but also kids being introduced to an adult world much easier. Believe me, I know what happened with alcohol. I know what happened with marijuana before legalization. I'm not naive to think that this is a whole new thing, but I feel like the door has simply been blown wide open. I think we're still looking to find how to control it and how to keep it out of kids' hands, and that's a big concern for me.
Thanks.
Just to touch on briefly, and again, this is meant as a conversation, but also a follow-up. So if there's something that you or the members of the public have as far as this enforcement piece that they would like to bring up and bring our attention, more than happy to hear. One of the other issues that we believe we've seen, I don't want to say a downturn, but less traffic enforcement is ironically the number of traffic posts that we do. So we are very committed to when somebody expresses to us a concern in an area about a traffic concern, whether it's speeding on a certain road or people failing to yield to pedestrians in a crosswalk, things like that, that we target that area. However, again, talking about the difference between deterrence and enforcement. So if we're sitting on a traffic post, and we're doing crosswalk enforcement in Memorial Plaza, and we sit someplace that's hidden, and we pull over 3 or 4 cars, most people would say, wow, that's great, you wrote 3 or 4 tickets for crosswalk enforcement. But all the other people who drove through that area did not know there was a police officer there. So we're not being the deterrent. So in a number of our traffic posts, not all, but on a number of our traffic posts, we want to be visible. We want to be visible to the community so they see, not only that we take it seriously, but also for the people who were considering, oh, you know what, maybe this is the day I drive too fast through Memorial Plaza. They're here. So it's not only the today effect, it's also the future effect that we're trying to create. But it does limit our ability, despite how many traffic posts we go on in a week or in a month or in a year, it does limit necessarily our ability to go out and do enforcement. Now, speeding, things like that, there are some places where you just have to, when somebody sees somebody pulled over on certain streets, they have to know that that person was probably speeding. So again, we're going to use this opportunity this beginning of this year to really dig down to make sure officers know what we expect of them, how we're not, listen, I should have said this, I should have led with this. This is not a quota system. We don't look at numbers. We don't determine who gets promoted based off of how many tickets you're in. We want officers to be active. We want officers to be proactive, but this is not a revenue generator. This is not a quota system. This is nothing like that. This is more giving officers more comfort, more tools to be able to address enforceable issues that happen on their tool. One of the big things we're going to do with enforcement, obviously, is with the goal, as I just briefly mentioned, we're going to make it a focus, especially with pedestrian safety. We know how important that is to the community. We are proud of the fact that, especially with all the changes that have come into town, we have more and more people coming into town, more and more people walking across streets and things like that. So again, I'll be working with the pedestrian committee to make sure that we hear their concerns and we have our resources where they need to be. Next. Almost to the end.
I was going to say, there seems to be an inverse relationship to the complexity of the question and the number of words.
So again, we're going to continue our commitment to officer wellness. I think in year 2 of this, we're better served to understand sort of what our needs are and what our resources are. So Guardian Revival also provides, they will come in, we have this schedule. They're going to come in and talk to us, not just about what wellness for a police officer looks like, but direct, specific things that we can do, whether it's nutrition, whether it's sleep, whether it is fitness, whether it is meditation, all aspects of officer wellness. They're coming in free of charge. This is one of the services that they provide to do a departmental deep dive and provide our officers with tangible plans for how they can get better. Some of that might be the hikes that they lead or the music venues that I spoke about during the promotion. They literally, if there's a guardian who wants to learn how to play the drums, they have a guy who will teach that person how to play the drums. And then hopefully, potentially use that as a connection, get that person maybe to like a jam session or some sort of musical opportunity that they can have to just really connect. It's the level of detail that they're going to bring to this department for wellness is great. In addition, we are looking to expand our, that's sort of in advance of a problem. We're also looking at different opportunities for employee assistance. There are a number of different agencies that do this, and we want to do a little bit more of our research to know sort of what our opportunities are, whether it is in the face of a traumatic event, inside the department, outside the department, here in the community. So we're examining our options for bringing better employee assistance to our employees. And lastly, it's only one word. It's a small one, but I'm sure it's going to start a conversation. So
The best for last.
that's right. So as we have discussed many times, our fleet, I've spoken to Mr. Morrissey. We speak regularly about the fleet, where it stands, what we need, what our needs are. We are committed to continuing to move away from fully gas-powered vehicles. We have, maybe we're already starting to win one of our goals, but we have a fully electric vehicle that is currently, we've submitted a PO for. We expect to take delivery of that within the next 2 months, possibly shorter than that. That will go into our administrative fleet for one of the lieutenants. His vehicle, which is a hybrid, will be pushed down to the patrol fleet. That car is actually pursuit rated and equipped to do that. So we're going to do that. We're continuing to work with Con Edison to bring village charging station to a location so that we have the ability to charge that car. And we are working with a company for a long-term fleet replacement plan. Hopefully we can come to you in the next few months. We're examining the options of it. Other larger jurisdictions have a sort of a different way of buying cars where you don't just buy the car outright. You do some different things with it. I don't want to give away too much at this point, but we are exploring different purchasing opportunities, which would potentially give us the opportunity to take more of our older cars out of the fleet. We asked them specifically, do you have electric vehicles? Do you have hybrid vehicles? They absolutely do. That is part of the plan. So we are looking to go, we are looking to continue our commitment to making the fleet less dependent on fossil fuels. And I open the floor for questions.
Well, not so much questions. I just want to make a couple of comments. So, as you know, I'm the liaison to the Climate Smart Task Force. And I'm currently with one of the other members working on climate action plan, which is setting goals for reducing emissions. And certainly, transportation vehicles will be one of the easiest in terms of like easiest to target changes that we can make. So I would love to learn more about the company that you're working with, but also the other thing is that we are increasingly becoming eligible for grants for this transition. So that's something to consider about. And then thirdly, Ben Sarabin, who's on our committee, knows quite a bit about charging stations and electric cars. So if we can ever be of assistance to you in this process, we would be happy to do so.
That was wonderful.
Where do
Thank
we
you.
stand with Con Ed now in terms of getting level 3 charging into the village?
Not there yet. We're just trying to fight for them to get us the electricity connection here. One of the things we're running into is just the electrical supply. They require a big amount, so that limits the opportunity.
Yeah.
For instance, we're gonna put the charging unit for the admin police vehicles right in our lot here. They don't have enough electricity here to do a level 3.
Right.
So that's the big.
So what's the throughput rate now that we can get there? Is it over 100, do you know?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, because I can say in some of the current gen vehicles, and I'm not talking about the Teslas, like the Ford or whatever, you can go from 20 to like 80% in 30 minutes,
Right.
20 to 30 minutes.
Right.
So the cycle time really is not bad. So it's not like
For level
when
3.
when we start, no, not
On a level
on a
1.
level 2. So level 3 is up to like 350, I want to say. If you get over 100, like 100, 120, you can still get from like 20 to 70 or 80% in about a half an hour. And that 80% is going to be a day in the village or 2 days in the village of operation, if you're not driving, because unlike your gas cars, when you're not moving, you're using a tiny amount of electricity. So it really is much more mileage based than cars that idle. The other thing, I think it would be helpful to continue I know you've had some conversations with other departments that have electrified, but South Pasadena now has 20 patrol vehicles that are all electric. So they're going through this, and again, they may not be the exact ones that we would buy or use, but the fact that there are larger municipalities that are doing pursuit, that have to incarcerate people and track down things and whatever, that's something to learn from for sure.
If you're authorizing me to go to South Pasadena to, I would ask around somewhere around New Year's Day.
I don't think Pasadena is the paradise you're making out.
You should check out too, my husband was the director on this show with Robert Downey Jr. about converting cars to electric. The first episode takes place on an army base in California. It's really interesting to see like what the army is doing in terms of really investing in this technology.
Yeah.
It's eye-opening.
Yeah, we are, I'm regularly having conversations. I've reached out to a number of people, just to see what the viability of certain things are. Again, infrastructure concerns are top of mind first and foremost, but again, the commitment to reducing our need for fossil fuels for this department is continues.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You should ask Mario for a ride in the new F-150. Have you seen it?
I have not seen it, but I'm a little jealous.
I love the fact that you're using it as a generator for, their project.
They pumped the water out of soldiers and sailors by hooking up the pump to the truck and leaving for an hour. It's great. Perfect. Silent. Right.
Moving fast.
Yeah. All right,
Okay.
Chief, thank you for that. I think these conversations continue to be fruitful. Very much appreciate them. Very much appreciate the work you put in to put it together. Very much appreciate the work you do that underlies all of it. And very glad to see you and the lieutenants and the entire force on a night when we have a proper motion.
Yes, and thank you all very much for your support. I think this goes without saying, but I probably should say it. Rank and file members of the department know that this board has their backs, that you support them, you support the work that we're doing, and it really is very much appreciated. So.
Right back at you.
Can I just say, Chief, I'm really impressed by this presentation, and I'm really impressed by a lot of the work that you're doing and the overall guiding principles of the direction in which you're taking the department. So I really commend you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, Chief. With that, is there any comment from a member of the public or anybody on Zoom? Raise your hand.
Well,
Welcome, Tom.
but it's not, well, it could be directed possibly to the chief.
All right,
Um,
Tom Rooney.
Tom Rooney, 26 Hillview Drive.
Yes.
Here in town. With the possibility of the speed limit in the village being reduced to 25 miles an hour. With all due respect, I don't see how that's gonna slow anybody down. Because at 30 miles an hour, they're doing 50 going down Washington Avenue. They're doing 50 plus going down Pleasantville Road. And as you were saying, boots on the ground, if they see him, I mean, if they, I know coming down by Bedford Road School, when there's a police car at Grandview at the bottom, cars will slow down. I live on the top of that hill and it works. It makes me slow down. So I'm just saying the expense that it's going to cost the town, the village, to change all the signs, I don't know that you're gonna get that much success out of the 5 miles an hour. Because honestly, people don't honor the 30, so they're never gonna honor the 55. They'll honor 55, the 25. So that was just one comment I wanted to make. And the other comment was traffic related, the Sawmill, the red light camera. I have personally, with my wife, almost got T-boned crossing that parkway with a car that did not stop going south at Grand Street. I used to live right up around the corner from there as a kid. There was hardly ever an accident there before modern things happened. But I don't know what good a red light camera will do there. I mean, is that supposed to just, there's a light coming up, or it's gonna take a picture of somebody going through the red light? Is that what it would do?
So yeah, my understanding is, yeah, it takes a picture and then the registered owner of the car, they get a picture of the license plate, the registered owner of the car is.
Well, maybe that would work. But something does have to be done at that corner. If you're ever in that neighborhood during school time, I feel sorry for that school crossing guard that's at that corner. That being said, I hung around all night just to stay the 30 miles an hour bit. So enjoy the night and thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom, we appreciate it.
Okay.
We don't always agree, but we always agree that you're in it for the right reasons and we appreciate
That's
it.
true. You mean sometimes we do?
We do. Go for it. We gotta hunt.
Write it down.
Right.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Take care.
All right, with that, we have a brief public hearing. Is there a motion to open a public hearing on introductory local law number 1 of 2024 upon passage, which will become local law 1 of 2024 to amend chapter 173-68 of the Code of the Village of Pleasantville concerning the addition of loading zone space on Cooley Street? So moved. Second. All in favor?
Hi.
Aye, motion carries. I will share the plan. Eric, you wanna give that the lowdown?
Sure.
Got the image up on the screen.
So highlighted in red is the identified space on Cooley Street.
It's right here.
Right there, yeah, located in close proximity to the crosswalk. It would be a 15-minute loading zone space, similar to the one on Memorial Plaza, which would be signed accordingly.
So this is Cooley Street.
Yep. Bedford Road.
Chatterbox is over here. Semi Memorial is over here. The parking lot behind the post office is here. Moving in this direction is the dental office headed towards Manhattan. All right, pretty straightforward. Comments or questions? Is there any comment from a member of the public? There being none, is there a motion to close the public?
So,
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion approved, public hearing is closed. All right. To the resolutions, call number 19.
below the Board of Trustees hereby approves the minutes of the regular meeting held on January 8th, 2024.
Is there a second?
Second.
Comments or corrections to the minutes of January 8th? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. Goal 20.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves the following budget amendments for fiscal year ending in 2024 as listed below. Increased revenue and expense of the general fund, $2,700, fees, police traffic control, for police patrol overtime. Appropriate fund balance, general fund, $71,000 transfer to capital for new police 2023 Mach-E vehicle capital project. Appropriate special fund purposes, Parkland deposits, $152,000 due to other funds, for Nanahagan Playground Project. Increased revenue and expense of the capital fund, $152,000 interfund transfer from the general fund for the same playground project. And the $71,000 interfund transfer from general fund for the police vehicle.
Is there a second?
Second.
Pretty straightforward. This police vehicle is in the budget.
No, we're appropriating. fund balance.
Appropriating.
Yeah,
fund balance.
I mean, we
It was
have,
in the plan.
it's in the plan, it's in our capital plan.
Right.
The irony with that is we have it scheduled for next fiscal year, but by the time we get delivery on it, it may be next fiscal year.
But we have the cash now.
Correct.
Although the chief indicated it might come.
Sooner,
So-
they have it on. Yeah,
Right.
whereas you may recall the hybrid vehicle that we ordered 11 months ago, we still don't have.
Right.
We might just have to substitute that for another.
Yeah, right, exactly.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion approved. David, number 21.
Because the other vehicles used by the the administrative folks are pursuit rated, so they could always get another electric vehicle and push down that person's vehicle to patrol. Okay. Resolved, the Board of Trustees hereby approves the abstract for payment of claims dated January 22nd, 2024 for fiscal year ending 2024, covering check numbers 109,739 to 109,858 from general fund $329,644.39. From special fund $150, water fund $226,735, capital fund $43,685.50, the refuse fund $26,261.45 for a total of $426,476.34. The payment of claims is attached.
Is there a second?
Second.
Comments or questions regarding the payment of claims? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. Michael, 22.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby authorizes the donation of 2 Pleasantville Music Festival tickets for Pleasantville High School Friends of the Performing Arts.
Is there a second?
Second.
Comments, questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion approved. Back to you, Paul, 23.
Whereas state legislature and the governor enacted legislation establishes property tax cap on the amount of the local government's property tax levy can increase each year, and whereas under this law, the total amount to be raised through property taxes charged on the municipality's taxable assets value of property will be capped at 2% on or the rate of inflation, whichever is less, with some exceptions. And whereas state legislation provides for local governments to override the cap to protect the unforeseen financial circumstances, and whereas state legislation requires that in the event that an override is necessary, the law enabling it must already have been adopted by the Board of Trustees prior to the adoption of the fiscal year budget. Now, therefore, be resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Pleasantville hereby authorizes the village clerk to notice a public hearing for Monday, February 12, 2024 at 8 p.m. to be held at Village Hall, 80 Wheeler Avenue, Pleasantville, New York, to hear comments on introductory law 2 of 2024, overriding the property tax cap for village fiscal year of 2024 to 2025.
Is there a second?
Second.
So this is a procedure we've gone through in recent years where we establish the right to override the tax cap if we deem it necessary in the course of the budget process, which we're beginning now and we'll be working on through the month of April. No certainty that we will need to override the cap, no certainty that we won't, but we need to have this in place to allow that to be a possibility. And I add to that, as perhaps some of you already know, the tax cap is rated at 2% or the rate of inflation, whichever is lower, which by definition says if inflation is higher than 2%, which it is, the rate of increase in our budget has to be 2% or less, which is, as you might imagine, a noose that gets tighter every year. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. 24, Nicole.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby authorizes the Village of Pleasantville to hold tax grievance night on February 20th, 2024 from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. 80 Wheeler Avenue, second floor, Pleasantville, New York, 10570.
Is there a second?
Second,
So we're able to do that here.
court is off that Tuesday.
Okay, in some past years, it's been done at the senior center. This is a date that's established by state law. If you wish to grieve your property taxes, you can file that night and appear. You do not need to do that. You can simply file without the need to appear, but you are welcome to do so if you wish, and we're required by law to sit here in case you want to. So,
But we can screen films, right?
not all in favor.
Aye.
Motion approved. 25D.
Resolve the Board of Trustees formally, it shouldn't be formally, yes, okay. Formally accepts the village tax roll warrant and account of unpaid taxes for fiscal year end 2024 as of January 19th, 2024.
Is there a second?
Second.
So attached is the list of people who are overdue in their taxes amounting to some $335,000. We encourage you to catch up. Penalties apply. It's not a very efficient way to borrow. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion approved. 26.
Resolve the Board of Trustees hereby authorizes the village administrator to advertise for bid 2024-03 for summer and teen travel camp bus services.
Is there a second?
Second.
The bus bid memo is attached. Annual process. All in favor? Aye, motion approved. Back to Paul. 27.
Whereas introductory local law 1 of 2024 has been introduced to amend chapter 173-68 of the Code of the Village of Pleasantville concerning the addition of loading zone space on Foley Street, and whereas the public hearing concerning introductory law 1 of 2024 was held and closed on January 22nd, 2024, and now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby adopts local law 1 of 2024.
Is there a second?
Second.
That's the follow-up to our brief public hearing this morning. Not a very weighty item to get the number 1 for the year, but there you have it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion approved. 28, we have already addressed. That was the resolution promoting David Cassell. So 29, Nicole.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves the appointment of Anthony DeRubis to the Village of Pleasantville Finance Department as an office assistant financial support, job class code 0726, CSEA wage schedule B, group 6, step 1, at an annual salary of $64,813 effective February 1st, 2024. Said appointment is subject to a probationary period not less than 12 weeks to a maximum of 52 weeks.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's an open slot in our finance department. Anthony comes extremely well recommended and with a strong background.
We have a long time coming doing this position, so.
Right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Welcome, sir. 30, David.
Result the Board of Trustees hereby authorizes the village administrator to sign a proposal with Woodard and Curran for the purpose of inspecting the Pleasantville water tanks in the amount of $19,850.
Is there a second?
Second.
So this and the next resolution regarding our water tanks, Eric, you want to give the,
Sure, yep, so as you know, the water tanks are scheduled to be replaced, and we're on a timeline to do that in 2027 by the time they're designed and permitted. The health department has noted weeping in the tanks that have been ongoing for decades now. Raised the desire for us to inspect the tanks, which we should do anyways, to verify that they can be operational for the next 3 years. There's no indication from our village engineer or water division that that's not the case, but we do want to be overly cautious. So I would go with that inspection.
all right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved, 31, Michael.
Resolved, the Board of Trustees hereby authorizes the village administrator to sign a proposal with Woodward and Curran for the purposes of the Village of Pleasantville's Community Water System Supply Emergency Response Plan from the vulnerability assessment update in the amount of $35,000.
Is there a second?
Second.
There,
So this is a plan that needs to be submitted every 5 years. There's been a lot of changes in the rules and regulations. It needs updating on a fast track timeline. So our village engineer, superintendent of public works recommends we utilize a consultant, which we once did, to make sure we submit a plan that meets all rules and regulations.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved, 32, Paul.
Result of the Board of Trustees hereby authorize the village administrator to sign an agreement with Empire AV LLC for staging services for the 2024 Pleasantville Music Festival.
Is there a second?
Second.
Empire AV is the supplier last year and they have submitted the best bid to return.
Yep, that is about 36,000, up from 31,000 last year. We had 2 other bidders. One was at about 49,000 and the other 69,000.
Wow. All right, pleased to see Empire AV back in their second year and now really knowing the ropes. And they did a good job for us last year, the first year out. They did. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion approved, 33, Nicole.
Resolved that the village board of trustees hereby accepts a donation in the amount of $3,000 for the replacement of the field blanket at Parkway Field.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion approved, 34, last of the night, so David.
Resolved the Board of Trustees hereby authorizes the retirement of Police Sergeant James O'Keefe effective February 6th, 2024.
Is there a second?
Second.
We appreciate 20 years of service from Jimmy O'Keefe, and we wish him well in the future. All in favor? Aye. Motion approved. That is the last of our regular agenda items. Is there any new business from the board? Any new announcements? Any further comment from an attendee here or on Zoom? There being none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. This is our second meeting in January. We will be back before you on Monday, February 12th. Second and fourth Mondays of the month. In the meantime, stay warm. Appreciate your attention, and you can always pick up the detail at pleasantville-ny.gov and videos at pctv76.org. Have a good night.